Who's that? I know it's Verso, but like... Why isn't it Gustave? Why does he have to look so cool? I know he doesn't replace Gustave. Nothing can ever replace Gustave. But it feels so like one in, one out, you know? I don't know if his visual age is the same age as Gustave. But they both feel like roughly the same age. Both guys, both like roughly the same build. And it feels too much like Gustave. And it feels so much like, let's just erase Gustave and then whack Verso in his place. And I don't like it at all. I'm sure he's a lovely man, but also I'm really glad that we did get Verso, because I think it would be so depressing to come back to camp with no Gustave, with Verso having not shown up, and to have to carry on literally just with that massive hole that Gustave's left. It kind of feels nice that something new has come in, even though it doesn't replace Gustave, and I'm still very, very upset. Hi everybody, sorry, that was not my usual intro, was it? I'm straight into being annoyed. Okay, so this is going to be a side episode, a side video, similar to what I've done before. Basically, we've just started Act 2. I don't know how many acts there are. I'm going to guess there's 3, maybe 4 or something. That feels like a good number. But quite a lot's happened, and everybody seemed to quite like when, after the intro, when I kind of did that sort of video sort of summarising my thoughts so far, my thoughts, and like a bit more of a delve into the characters, and just kind of took some time and space to sort of unpack what had happened so far and how I felt about where things were at and so on. So I'm going to do a video like that now we've kind of gone into Act 2, and it feels like we've kind of crossed that line now. Just looking back over Act 1, I'm not going to fully revisit what I said before, but I remember some of the things I said in the last video about some characters, sort of see how they've changed, if they have, and there's a few characters who I never actually... I think I did Gustave, Sophie and Maelle, but I never covered Lune. Obviously now we've got Sciel. I just wanted to touch a bit more on like those characters and sort of delve into them like I did with the others. Go over some of my favourite places and tracks so far, like audio tracks, because there's been some really good music. Go into what happened before, now I've had some time to kind of, well, to sleep, but also to process and think about it and reflect on it. Yeah, just sort of a catch up with you and me, just sort of checking in and just seeing how things are at. So I'm not going to get into any of the story or do any exploration. My sister has told me that I shouldn't trigger any cutscenes as long as I don't deliberately speak to the characters or try and leave camp. So as long as I stay within camp and don't go out of my way to speak to anybody, I should be able to move around and that should be fine. So I'm probably just going to stay within camp, but we'll just kind of talk through everything that has just happened, my current theories, because some of them immediately got thrown out the window after the last episode, and some of them I think can still hold. Okay, so first I'm going to address the elephant in the room. I'm going to talk about the end of the last episode and what happened. There's a lot I want to go into, which is going to refer back to last episode or the things that happened, but for now I just want to encapsulate my thoughts and feelings on that moment, because at the end of the last episode, as many of you saw, I think it got to about 1 AM by the time I came off, and I was already so tired, and then everything happened when I already felt like my brain had gone to bed. And obviously that was quite a shocking turn of events. So I think even if I'd been refreshed, I think I would have struggled to really do justice to articulating what had just happened and how I felt about it. I did worry that maybe everybody would want me to get straight into talking about it rather than me just like immediately ending the episode and going. But I'm quite glad that some of the comments have said that you actually appreciate that I'm giving it time to sleep on it and think about it and process it, because it's probably going to lead to a better reflection on what happened. So I'm very glad that you guys felt that way, because I felt the same. I just knew it would not be worthy of what happened if I tried to talk about it there and then. Oh, I'm kind of dreading this because I almost don't even want to think about it. I want to kind of live in a happy made up place where it didn't happen and it was all just in my imagination or a bad dream or something. But it did happen. I genuinely feel like I've gone through some kind of like grieving process. The very next day after that, I had a driving lesson, and my driving instructor is a gamer as well who has played Expedition 33. He doesn't give me any spoilers, but he's often quite keen to know how far I've got through the story. And I got in the car and I was just so kind of exhausted, but more like emotionally exhausted. I'd slept, it was a new day, I had had breakfast and everything. But he was like, "Oh, how are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, actually, I just felt so, like, it was genuinely felt like a terrible experience for me, like terrible bad news." Spice is back. And obviously he understood because he's played the game before. He actually said to me, after I told him like what had happened and that I just reached Act 2, he said, "Did you wonder why Gustave's skill tree was all locked?" And I was like, "That's why you couldn't unlock the skills." I was like, I wondered about that. I was like, oh, they're so cheeky that they had all those extra skills that you were never going to be able to unlock. I thought you just had to get to a certain point in the story or a certain level and then they would unlock. And I've checked, and other characters have locked skills as well. And I'm torn between them doing that so Gustave's was very in keeping with everybody else and it didn't look suspicious that his was all locked when nobody else's was. But then also worrying and thinking like, oh my god, are they going to die? Is it because like you can't get to those skills? And let me just put the cat down. I'm sure he'll be back. But for now, I am not naive enough to think that nobody else is going to die in this story. They've clearly shown that nobody is safe. Even the people you think are safe are not safe. But I don't think that the locked skills are a sign that this person is going to die. I think they just had that for Gustave to blend in with everybody else and make it... If he had a really, really small skill tree, you'd know something was up. So it was like, oh no, he's got this like normal size skill tree with all these locked skills. So sneaky. So yeah, I think I genuinely did need some time to... I know it's just a game, but I was so upset. And then to process it, because it was really shocking, but also you were given so much information and so much new questions. I don't know how to put it, because it's not necessarily answers, but you see more things that you didn't even know were in play, and you don't necessarily understand what they are, but it raises more questions. There's a few things. Some things I remember, but I cannot even begin to fathom what they mean. I'm so lost. I know as much as if I hadn't seen those bits at all. So, for example, when Maelle got, I don't know, like, cast out of reality or whatever happened to her, and then you just saw her... Did it look like she was falling or floating? I can't remember, but she was in front of, like, a glowing ring, and you just heard two voices, a man and a woman. That glowing ring looks like the ring of the planet that has like whatever fusion or light going on around it. I assume it's a planet with my like normal real life brain, but in this game it could be anything. But that kind of halo of light that sets behind the monolith during the gamage, and it looked very much like that. And when I went back and did the editing, you may have seen the comment I put in, I noticed that when the paintress removed and replaced the number, not only did the number disappear, but that ring of light disappeared as well, which is very interesting. If it is some kind of celestial I don't know, moon or planet or something going on with the ring of light on it or behind it or whatever is happening. It would be very bizarre if she could just erase it and replace it that quickly and from that distance. So I don't know, is it a planet? It seems like it, but maybe either she is super, super, super powerful and it's like a magic planet or something, or maybe it's something else. But it seemed like that was what Maelle was suspended above or in front of in that clip. And that's all I've got for that. I don't know anything. I can't even guess what more there is to that. I need to be back. One thing that has been repeating in my mind over and over, and I can't quite decide on, is when Renoir, which I think I've remembered his name right, when he said something along the lines of, "You won't understand this now, but this is a kindness, not a cruelty."
You won't yet understand. But this is a kindness, not a cruelty.
I think in his mind, he's telling the truth. I don't think he's just straight up lying. But I can't tell if it is the accurate truth and there is just something we don't know, and eventually we'll realise that it was best for Gustave, or nicer for Gustave than what would have happened had he not been killed. Or if Renoir, from his twisted perspective, is thinking that, but in the bigger picture, Gustave didn't deserve to die and it wasn't the kind of thing for him. Is there so much more to what's going on than we understand, that actually that was a good thing to happen to Gustave, and it just doesn't seem like it or feel like it for us right now based on what little we know? Or is Renoir kind of imposing his priorities and his values and his perspective on the matter and thinking it was a kindness? Oh, I just realised it looks like my head's on fire. Yeah, is it Renoir, sort of from his perspective, he thinks it's for the greater good, but actually it's not? I cannot know right now. But that's something that keeps coming back to my mind, is what did he mean by that? Is it accurate? And either way, I think there is so much more to this than we can understand right now. I had no idea that was going to happen. I did think we were going to lose people along the way. I did think that maybe Gustave would die, because I think we saw him downed in Maelle's first nightmare. But I was thinking that would be, if it happened, it would be like right near the end. I did not expect it to happen now. I thought it would be, would be almost at the monolith, maybe would have not quite reached the monolith, but, would be sort of end game. And then maybe we'd lose people. Or maybe sort of 2/3 of the way through, when we were just starting to pick up like the beginning of the end. Maybe we'd lose some of the others. I've played some games before where it's kind of been very bittersweet, where some people would give their lives up to buy time or opportunity for the others to proceed and see things through, and I thought it might be something like that with like Lune or Sciel or someone. I thought maybe Gustave would die, but I was thinking like very last part of the game. So that came out of absolutely nowhere for me. I did not expect that at all. Even when it was building the suspense and you kind of realised that Renoir was showing up, I don't know what I expected. I didn't think it would be good. I was very nervous. You could probably tell from my facial expressions. I was like, oh god, what's happening? But I think I thought there'd maybe be some big showdown, big battle, and they'd be in bad shape but make it out. Or maybe it would be like when they show up in camp and speak to Maelle, and it would be very intimidating but safe. I literally said at the start of the last episode, like, oh, maybe they're not so bad. They've not actually harmed us or Maelle, so maybe we've got like an exemption card, and you know, they'd go after like Alan and the other expeditioners, but Maelle and her friends they'll leave alone. And I genuinely believed that, and I had terrible timing to say that at the start of that episode. I think it was only when I saw in the subtitle at the bottom when Gustave was saying, oh, it's not about the size of the rock or something, and I saw it was about to cut him off. It was only in that moment I thought, oh my god, is he about to get hit? Because it looked like he was going to get cut off suddenly, and I knew Renoir was there. So I suppose I did maybe expect it, but only a second before it happened did I think, oh god, is Gustave about to get shot or something. At first I thought, I was in shock, and I just thought, oh my gosh, Gustave is dead. And then he turned around and he was talking and then started to fight Renoir, and I thought, oh my god, no, he's alive, it's okay, we can heal him. And then Renoir was so powerful, but at the end Gustave had his overcharge, and I thought, yeah, okay, that's right, we'll punch him, and I don't know, he'll go flying and we can get away. I kind of was still convinced that somehow this was going to be very close, but okay. And then Renoir got back up. I think I thought he was going to die when he turned around and spoke to Maelle, and you can just see he had like the slightest ghost of, I don't know if it's a smile, but his face softened and he just seemed so accepting. He didn't seem like strained or like he still had loads of fights in him. It just looked like he was just absolutely making peace with this. And I think then I was thinking like, oh god, no, Gustave. But then Verso showed up and said to Maelle, you know, go with your friends, I'll finish up here, or I'll like sort things out here. And I thought, great, he's going to save Gustave. You know, we've revived characters in fights before who've gone down. I didn't know who Verso was, but he seems to care about Maelle, and he can see how distraught Maelle was about Gustave, so I thought, Verso will fix it, he'll bring Gustave back. It was an emotional roller coaster. I kept going from, oh god, he's dead, to like, oh, it's okay, he's gonna make it, and like back and forth and back and forth. And I think the only time I really was like, oh no, he's gone was when Verso showed up with his arm and no body. One thing that, it's a bit morbid, and I don't think it's going to be possible, but one thing that I've been mulling over is, as far as I understand, if I've understood correctly, when humans kill humans, or when humans die naturally, their chroma disappears. So their life force or life energy, I take that to mean. They die, they're a dead body, and then they fizzle away. Like the Gamage, they turn into chroma, smoke, ash, ink, whatever it is. And they disappear. When Nevrons kill people, as we found with the previous expeditioners, their chroma stays trapped and rigid and solid as a body. So they're a dead body, but you can kind of see they look very stony and ashen, which I assume is the chroma stuck in place. And I kind of want to go back and see if I can find Gustave's body. I don't think I'll be able to, but I want to try, because I'm very curious to know, will it have disappeared, or will it still be stuck like the previous expeditioners? Because I know that he was killed by a human, by Renoir, so I assume he would have disappeared. But we know that Renoir and Verso and Alicia and maybe Maelle, I'll get to that later, we know that they're not normal people. They don't age. They're not Nevrons, as far as I know, but so I would like to know what happens when these people kill normal people. Does it act like Nevrons, or does it act like normal humans? And I've had for a long time now the question of when someone gamages, or when someone dies and floats away in particles, like the Gamage or like a normal natural death? Are they just gone? Obviously, I don't know if there's like an afterlife in this game or if they just no longer exist. But like, are they like if we died in reality, is that it? Is it the same, or is their chroma going elsewhere and being used in another way, maybe by the paintress or something? Like, is she kind of harvesting them when she changes the numbers? I don't know. I just think she gamages, or she changes the number, which gamages people. And she seems to be creating Nevrons, or at least the white ones that we've met, like Jar and Demenure. And Hexka, I think its name was. She seems to create those. So is she kind of taking their life force and creating Nevrons? Or, I don't know. I'm not sure. So yeah, I would like to see if I can find Gustave and find out what's happened to him. But I also, I don't know, I just get the feeling you're not going to be able to access that area, or you'll go back and you won't be able to find him, but it's not really confirmed whether he gamaged or, not gamage, I keep calling it gamage, sorry, whether he smoked away or stayed as a dead body. I feel like it will remain inconclusive, but I want to at least try and give it my best shot. Renoir said something about how all this time, I really can't remember it well, but it was something about how his family was torn apart, or his family has been divided. He didn't seem satisfied. It wasn't like, oh, we've been living a great life all this time. It sounded like he's not had his family together like he wants all this time.
A lifetime. A lifetime with my family torn apart. No. I want my family back.
It's not your family. But she is.
And then Verso said something like, they're not your family, but she is, and pointed up to Alicia. So who is they? We know that Renoir is trying to protect the paintress, because he sees her as the source of his agelessness, which he seems to want to have. I'm starting to think maybe I was wrong about Alicia and the paintress being the same person, because they are talking about them as if they're different people. So who is they that Renoir was implying is his family and Verso said that they are not? And then why is Alicia different and she is his family? The only ghost of an idea I have on that is maybe, I noticed last time that Alicia did seem to be wearing expeditioner clothes. So I wonder if she was actually Renoir's daughter, or a young expeditioner who sort of fell into that dynamic with him. And maybe she did come across with Expedition Zero. She's also gained the agelessness, but stuck in her younger form. And maybe that's why Verso said, like, she is your family, like, she is a Lumerian, or, you know, she is your daughter. I don't know who the others could be that Verso is saying is not his family. But I'm also stuck on that expedition journal we found, which said about white-haired beings that don't speak and take human form.
We caught one of those white-haired bastards. She looks human, but I know she's a monster. She refuses to speak, but I'll make her talk.
And it seemed like to find something that could be so major in just an expedition journal, I don't know, but it did sound an awful lot like Alicia, but it did sound like there were multiple of them. So could it be clones, or are there others similar to Alicia, and maybe that's the others that Renoir is talking about, and that Verso is pointing out is not his family, but Alicia genuinely is? So I don't know. I feel like I'm taking breadcrumbs and trying to make a whole loaf of bread with them, but I've only got tiny, tiny amounts. Another thing that I was really quite I noticed, and I'm not sure if this means anything, I think I'll need to play a bit more to really find out, but one thing I found interesting is after Renoir and Alicia showed up in camp the first time, Renoir was like, Alicia, I told you to stay home, and he said her name to that girl or woman with the mask. Her name is Alicia. Well, that's what Renoir called her. But even once we knew her name, after that, the subtitles, I don't know about in that cutscene, but definitely in the second one, kept referring to her as Masked Woman, not as Alicia. So I can understand it to begin with because we didn't know her name. But even once we knew her name, it kept calling her Masked Woman still. Which I just found odd, because surely it would change to Alicia once you know her name. And I think I won't know if that's done by design or if that's just, I don't know, they, for consistency's sake or something, kept it the same. But now we know Renoir's name. It'd be interesting to see if his name in cutscenes changes to Renoir, or if he's still referred to as White-Haired Man. Because if he's still referred to as White-Haired Man, then I think maybe they just don't update the name in the subtitles, even once you find out their real name. But if his changes to Renoir, now that we know his name, then why didn't Alicia's change to Alicia? So I'll need to play more, I think, but I'm curious about that. And then in that scene where Maelle was like suspended above the glowing circle, the man sounded like Renoir, so I think that's Renoir. The woman, I couldn't tell if she sounded like Alicia or sounded different. I feel like she sounded different, but then it's hard to tell because it was a different scene entirely. And I can't remember what it referred to her as, but I think it was different to, it definitely wasn't Alicia, and I don't think it was Masked Woman either. I think it was like Unknown Woman or Mysterious Woman or something. So is that a second woman, or is that the same as Alicia / Masked Woman? I feel like that's the Paintress, but I don't know if the Paintress is Alicia or if they're different. I'm starting to, before I was convinced, I was like, I think they're going to be the same person. Now I really don't know. Is Alicia like the Paintress's child or something? With the conversation that happened there as well, it was an interesting dynamic between the woman and the man, probably Renoir, because to begin with it sounded like, I can't remember exactly who said what or when, it sounded like she was almost berating him, like, how dare you, she's not ready, or whatever she said. Almost like his equal, or maybe even his superior. But then his response sounded equally as confident and authoritative.
You let her come. You know she's too weak for this. How could you let her take such a risk?
You only care when things are right in front of you. My sweet child, you are supposed to stay home. I told you not to worry. But since you're here now, just stay put.
What are you saying? You must go home, now. This does not involve you.
When this is over, we'll go home together.
No!
But neither one of them, I don't know, they both seem to be in charge. So if it was Alicia, she seems to be more dependent or childlike with Renoir in how she physically behaves, not necessarily how she talks. But like Renoir's like, I told you to stay home, which sounds very fatherly or very paternal or bossy. But then she was like going in for the hug, and but then those two people talking in front of the ring sounded, neither one of them sounded like a kid. And I'm also not sure that Alicia is a child. It refers to her as like Masked Woman, but I have always taken it to be more like Maelle, so kind of a teenager / young woman, but still kind of a kid. I think though that's just because they're about the same height, and it's hard to gauge how old Alicia is, but I think she looks quite young. She could just be a small woman. I could be being heightist, so Or maybe she was Maelle's age when all of this started and the fracture happened or Expedition Zero happened. And obviously by now her visual age would still be the same, but 67 years have passed, so I suppose mentally and emotionally she's probably going to be like in her 70s or 80s. Definitely not a child. So yeah, I am making assumptions about her age, or I'm more like talking about how she seems visually to me, but she could well be a fully grown old lady inside for all I know. So yeah, so that's kind of the things I'm thinking of after that scene. A part of me really didn't want to log back in because I'm gonna miss Gustave so much. I'm kind of hoping and not hoping that we get some maybe flashback cutscenes, or maybe Maelle dreams of Gustave so he's kind of not fully gone. I think it would just feel so harsh to just have him never show up in the game again. I'm hoping maybe he shows up, I don't know, in some way, even if not literally. But also I know that's going to be heartbreaking to see him again. And I do think I will really like Verso. From like the small snippet I've seen of him so far, I think he seems really cool and like quite a likeable character, but I think it all just feels a bit raw right now. So I don't like the feeling that he's replacing Gustave. I'm very glad he showed up and saved Maelle, but I kind of wish he could have shown up a bit sooner, like also saved Gustave. So maybe unfairly, I feel a little bit bitter towards him at the moment, but I'm sure it will calm down and go away. Okay, I'm gonna wander around a bit and just see if any cutscenes trigger from just me moving around. So there's a few things I want to go into during this video, just so you know what to expect, although by the time you're watching this I'll hopefully have some timestamps in. I want to cover characters, both those, apart from Sophie, those I covered before, and the ones I haven't covered yet, and just really delve into what I think of them as characters, what I think's going on with them, my current thoughts and feelings on them. I want to talk about things like the world overall, how I feel about the story and the pacing of it and the plot twists so far. Obviously I don't know how this is all going to end, so this is really just my, up to the start of Act 2, my thoughts on it. And then maybe later on I'll do another review after things change. I'd like to talk about the combat system and what I think of the combat system. Now I've sort of played for quite a bit and seen a few different characters and how the combat works, slowly getting the hang of it. I'd like to talk about some of my favourite places and favourite soundtracks, and also some of my least favourite ones as well, just in case anyone's curious about what I'm thinking of those. And just my overall feelings about the game, current theories and everything. I think I've covered quite a lot just in this first bit, so I don't know if I'll have much more to add at the end, but I'll read through my notes and just see if there's anything more to tag on and get into. So just to kind of, I suppose, a bookmark. We've just finished Act 1, just about to start Act 2, where I'm currently at, what I've liked so far, what I've not liked so much so far, and yeah, really delve into what's going on in my head with everything for anybody who's curious. But as I said before, I'm going to try and trigger a minimal amount of things if I can. This isn't going to be a proper episode where we progress the story at all or do any exploration. If you're not interested in what's going on in my brain, feel free to skip this one and just pop along to the next one. But if you would like to know where I'm at, grab a cuppa, have a nice comfy sit down, and we'll get into it and just chat about the game so far. Okay, that's good. I thought as soon as I got close it would start at a cutscene, but it looks like I can run up to them. Oh good, so I can stand at my usual spot. See, that planet was always gold when stuff happens to it, but now it's kind of blue. So is it only affected when it's gold? Is it kind of like a golden hour, blue hour sort of thing? And that's why it changes colour? Or is there more to what happens when it's gold? Verso is a really cool character. He looks very cool. He reminds me a little bit. Do you remember I said back in episode 1 that Gustave reminded me of a kind of uncle in the study character who like smells of books and leather and will talk to you about philosophy, and he just looked very yeah, I can imagine him like owning a library or or working away in the study. And Verso kind of gives me like a pirate kind of impression. I don't know if it's like the sash around his waist, but he kind of looks a bit more roguish, but yeah, in a kind of pirate kind of way. I like it. Really love the sort of white streaks in his hair. I know that that can happen from stress or shock. It's hard to tell with him. Is that from age and he just got some streaks, or was it from whatever has happened to him and he kind of got like the shock streaks in his hair? Because that doesn't necessarily have to be down to age, I don't think. But it looks very cool. So where's Lune? So if Sciel and Maelle are there, where's Lune gone? Where's Esquie? Is she over by the Lune? I will also be covering what I plan to do in the next proper episode. I do plan to go back to Stonewave Cliffs. I know I kind of started to rush through a bit and didn't thoroughly explore, so my plan was always to go back, but I just needed to sort of wrap up and head to bed. Where is she? Well, it's confirmed that Mystery Man Verso was not the curator. At least I got that right. And I got right that it was Ben Starr, but... Ah, there she is. Oh, I want so much to talk to them and find out what's going on. But alas, it will have to wait. Okay, at least everyone's accounted for. Can't have anyone else going. I just know where everyone's at. I feel like I've got anxious attachment now. I just need to make sure everyone's here and okay. Okay, I've written down some notes. This is going to hopefully be somewhat coherent. First character I want to get into is Gustave. Because last time, I think I did it was literally before I got into Act 1, immediately after the prologue, I summarised what I thought of Gustave, Maelle and Sophie. Obviously, Sophie has not changed since then because she died. But Maelle and Gustave I would like to go over. Obviously, they've been through a lot, and a lot has happened, and a lot has been revealed. So I do think that it's worth dipping back into what I thought of them back then, what I feel that I was right about or wrong about, or what has changed. Maybe I was right back then, but was no longer the case by now. Back during the attack on the beach, it was obviously extremely unexpected. They were braced for danger and for violence, but I think they were expecting it to be once they got into the continent a bit, not immediately after they got off the ship. And not so brutally either. I think even if they had expected some combat on the beach, I think they thought it would just be a few Nevrons, nothing they couldn't handle. Understandably, Gustave was terrified, and this fight or flight kicked in, and he was just like a deer in the headlights the whole time. He did not handle it very well in terms of the expedition's success. I would say he was more of a burden than a help. He kind of became a bit useless, and a lot of people had to put themselves in harm's way to try and get him to safety, or ended up getting hurt while he was just sort of running around scared, terrified. That was how it started, and then we saw him lose hope and he almost killed himself, and then thankfully Lune found him, and it really didn't feel like he came back at that point. It just felt like he was putting one foot in front of the other and just shuffling along, hoping that he could find some hope again, just sort of letting Lune lead him to the next part of wherever they were going to regroup. It only really felt like he came back to himself once they found Maelle, or once he knew Maelle was out there and could go and get her. he had been talking up until he found Maelle about just getting Maelle and going back to Lumiere, living out there last year. He'd given up all hopes or all ambition to defeat the Paintress. But once he found Maelle again, he got that motivation back and was like, yeah, we're going to take on the Paintress and whatnot. So I feel like he really, really returned to who he was before, but only once they found Maelle. But then at the end of the last episode, it was a different situation. It wasn't loads of Nevrons, it was just Renoir. They didn't have all of their party. It was only Gustave and Maelle. But you can kind of see a lot of parallels. It was still a very high-stress, unexpected situation, much like it was at the beach. And yet this time, Gustave stood his ground, and he didn't seem afraid. He seemed so calm and confident and just sort of dug his heels in. And I know a lot of that's going to be because he was stood between Maelle and the threat. But it wasn't even like he was terrified and forcing him to stay there. And also, Maelle was on the beach, and, his survival instinct and fear still took over. He wasn't scanning and trying to find Maelle and have her as the priority on the beach. He was just running, hiding in shock, staring death in the face and waiting for it to end him. But this time he was regulated. He was there, he was present, fully switched on. And it wasn't even like he was wide-eyed and terrified, but like quaking in his boots and forcing himself to stay in front of Maelle. He just wanted answers and was trying to reason with Renoir. And even when he realised that that wasn't going to work, he just accepted it. I still can't get the image out of my head when the most heartbreaking moment when he just turned around to Maelle and said, for those who come after, right? Like, I know, we all know in that moment he knew what was going to happen and was making peace with it. But he didn't seem afraid, he didn't seem maybe a little bit sad, but he didn't seem like he couldn't accept this, or this was so unfair, or that he was still going to try and find a way. Like, he knew what was going to happen, and yet he was so calm. And that was such a different Gustave to who we saw on the beach. And I remember saying that Gustave seemed to me like somebody who was very capable, very clever, and strong in so many ways, but maybe somebody who doesn't deal very well with unexpected situations, with high adrenaline, high stress, improvising situations, which I think we can argue that moment with Renoir was. But I did wonder if his time on the continent and sort of adapting to this unpredictable environment, the danger of this environment, he's gone from like Lumiere, and I know they've got the Gamage, but otherwise it seems like a nice community, and they've gone into this place of violence and chaos and natural beauty, but also a lot of tragedy and death, and I feel like he adapted quite well over the course of that act. And then by the end, I don't know what it was that changed in him, but it really did feel like he had changed. But one thing that I don't want to overlook is that I did notice that when he was with Maelle, when he was with his apprentices, anybody who he had a strong guardianship over, or a feeling of guardianship over, he was very good at putting on a brave face, even when he was struggling, to reassure them and to seem okay. It's what a lot of parents do with their kids when they're stressed or worried, but they'll pretend like everything's fine because they need to be reassuring and steady, and comforting towards their kids, so their kids don't get scared, but in their own time, away from the kids, then they can worry and get stressed. Very similar to what police or firefighters or doctors might do. They need to reassure and calm people down, even in high stress situations. Obviously a lot of other professions as well I've not mentioned, but it's kind of that compartmentalizing Like, don't worry, it's okay, you'll be alright, we'll figure this out, everything's fine, and then they'll deal with their own emotions in their own time, privately. And I noticed that Gustave seems to do that with like the apprentices, like how he smiled and was like, oh, thanks guys, and everything on the day of Sophie's gamage, minutes before Sophie gamaged, and we know he wasn't okay then, but he still put on a smile and seemed like so grateful and so happy. We've seen him as well, despite all the tragedy and everything, him sort of messing around with Maelle to cheer her up. You know, he is such a good dad / big brother figure, and he really does put in so much effort to make sure that the people he is looking after are okay, regardless of what he's feeling. So it's really hard to tell if in that final moment he actually felt as calm as he seemed, and really was that peaceful and accepting of it, or if he just didn't want Maelle to worry, or at least wanted to reduce the trauma and the stress of it that she was going to be feeling. Obviously he knows she's going to be distraught, but I wonder if it was just his last gift to her was to try and make her feel a little bit less sad or a little bit less distressed, to try and make it seem like he didn't mind, he was peaceful about it, and she didn't have to feel sad for him, even though she'd sort of feel sad for herself that she'd lost him. I don't know, I'm not sure if it was the brave face he puts on, or if that's genuinely how he was feeling inside. But either way, you know, on the beach he could have done the same thing. He could have found Maelle, acted okay, but instead it's like instinct took over. But even then on the beach he could have grabbed Maelle, like looked for Maelle, tried to find her, and then done the same and reassured her and acted okay, but instinct took in. But in that final moment that did not happen. He was fully himself, he was fully present, he was making all of his choices consciously as far as I could tell, and it wasn't just instinct override. And he just stood his ground and stared death in the face and accepted it. And like, how brave was that? From our sort of introvert, socially awkward, easily overwhelmed guy, to the one we saw at the end of Act 1. He was just so brave. I'm so like weirdly proud of him, but also like so sad that I still feel so sad that he died. It's gonna take a while, I think. I think the expedition and defeating the Paintress was like still incredibly important to him. Once he'd found Maelle and got that drive back, I think that was still incredibly important to him. The people he cared about, I think at this point, just Maelle, but sort of the people we've seen before as well, Sophie and the apprentices as well. I think they were all his priority too. I think where possible he tried to balance those two priorities. For example, if all he cared about above all was their safety and well-being, I think he would have really protested against Maelle coming with him, because this is a very dangerous place. But I think where possible he tried to like keep them in balance. At least Maelle was by his side and he could keep her safe. When given the ultimatum between the mission or between keeping Maelle safe, Maelle was always the top priority. I think he always put the people he cared about first. When he knew Maelle was alive but hadn't found her yet, he said, we're going to get Maelle and go back to Lumiere and just live out the rest of our year. Getting Maelle and getting back to safety was more important. Obviously then he found Maelle and decided to carry on, but he did then speak to Maelle and say, you know, you could stay in the Gestural village and you don't have to come with us and stuff. So I don't think he was fully strict about it, like no danger for you. But I think, although both were incredibly essential to him, I think his absolute top paramount priority was always going to be looking out for the people he is closest to and feels very protective over. And we saw that again to the end, him standing in the way. I suppose if Maelle was just any other expeditioner to him, he probably could have tried to run away and left Maelle to it, but of course he wasn't going to, because he's Gustave and there's no way he would remove himself from standing between the threat and Maelle. He did have very black and white thinking to the end as well. I can't remember when it was, but I remember there being a conversation between Gustave and Lune. They both really wanted answers, and Lune, her approach was like, we should find out as much as we can before we proceed, and Gustave was like, let's just kill the paintress and figure it all out after that.
This is ultimately a war of information. There's still too much we don't understand. Where the paintress comes from? Why she does what she does? Who is she? 70 years and we still barely know anything.
And the man on the beach. Yeah, too many unknowns. But if we take down the paintress, at least that gives future generations a chance to unravel the mystery.
So I think he still has very good versus evil, us versus the paintress thinking. So much has come to light, or should I say, so much has become unclear since we've arrived at the continent, and I am now questioning, like, are we the good guys? Are we the bad guys? I don't even think we know everything about ourselves, so how do we know that we should be killing the paintress? And I'm kind of with Lune on that one. I kind of want to know before we take any drastic actions that we might end up regretting, or maybe are very misinformed. But Gustave is still very much like, we should defeat the paintress, like standing by that theory of like, we're the good guys, the paintress is evil. And he does want answers, but he's like, we can sort out all the lore and the reasons and everything afterwards, if need be, if we don't find out as we go. So we had that black and white thinking, I think, the whole way through into the end. We obviously saw it right at the start in Lumiere, and at the very end, he said to Renoir, we should be on the same side. So he's like talking about sides, like us versus the paintress. So it seemed like even right to the end, he still had that very black and white mindset. So yeah, I want to go and find his body. A very, very optimistic, but very very tiny part of me hopes that we might, I don't know, he might come back as a Nevron, or maybe when time or physics or whatever has happened restarts, maybe he'll come back in some way, but I don't know, that also feels unlikely. Unlike just me having wishful thinking. One thing I actually wouldn't say expected but hoped would happen is, because we never actually saw Lucien die on the beach. I think I remember him getting, obviously he defended Gustave and protected him, and then he got snatched away and we didn't see him confirmed dead. So I kind of thought a big plot twist was going to be Lucien was actually alive the whole time, and has just been lost in the continent or stuck somewhere. I thought that was going to be the major plot twist. I was hoping it would be. Yeah, I thought we would gain someone we thought we'd lost, not lose someone we thought we wouldn't lose. So as upset as I am about it, what a brilliant plot twist. I'm angry about it, but also so impressed. And then I'm angry that I'm impressed about it. I feel betrayed by this game. What brilliant storytelling at the same time. I think me outside of this game, remembering that this is just a game, I love it. I think that was such a brilliant, unexpected thing to happen. But me, as attached to the game, feel personally attacked that they've taken one of my people, and Gustave of all people as well. Okay, so now for Maelle. Obviously a lot has happened with Maelle, and none of it is very clear. And I feel like I felt mostly quite sure of who Maelle was when I did the last video on sort of Maelle's personality. And now I feel like I've gone backwards and I have even less of an idea of who she is. I didn't know everything before, but I kind of thought, okay, yeah, she's a human from Lumiere, grew up as a orphan, went into foster care. This is her personality. This is probably what she's going to be like. And then all of this continent stuff's happened, and I'm like, who is Maelle? Like, do we really know her? Does she even know who she is? I think she herself is feeling very mixed. I think, similar to us, I think she thought she knew who she was. She has mentioned that she always had that sense of not belonging or not having a place in Lumiere. I don't think she expected that to change when she went to the continent, but I think she felt quite clear in that. I think she just kind of thought maybe she was just an outcast, and that was just the way it was, and then she'd go to the continent, stay with Gustave, her like one, as far as I can see, her one truly emotional connection that she had. Either defeat the Paintress or die trying, and I think that was as simple as it was for her. Like I said last time, I don't think she's been deceiving everyone or this is all an act. I genuinely think she doesn't know what's going on as much as myself and the rest of everybody in this game, as clueless as we all are. It does almost seem like she's been here before or knows about the continent far beyond what she should do and what even she thinks she knows. It seems to be something instinctual or something subconscious almost. Like she doesn't know why she feels this connection. It almost seems like with that Nevron, she almost goes into a bit of a daze sometimes, or like muscle memory or something takes over, and consciously she's not sure why and doesn't understand her connection to this place, but she feels it and she knows there's something. And I think she is equally as confused as to what. I think a lot of that, and with Renoir and Alicia showing up as well and talking to her as if she has this whole history that she doesn't know about. I think it has been quite overwhelming for her. I think she's confused, she's anxious. I remember Gustave having a conversation with her and saying something along the lines of, when he feels a bit lost or not sure what's up ahead, he just focuses on the people around him.
I don't understand what's happening. And I feel like I never understood. Like, I'm always missing something that everyone else just gets. In Lumiere, life never made sense, and I never fit, and now out here, when it was just starting to maybe feel good, then this happens, and...
Yeah. I hate it too. Things we don't understand. They just make us feel small and powerless. But it helps, you know, to focus on the things I do understand, on the people I care about and who care about me. And, you know, now I feel a little less lost, because at least we're lost together.
I think all of this stuff is overwhelming, but she's always had Gustave, the party, Gustave especially, and now I'm a bit concerned because she no longer has Gustave. She does have Lune, she does have Sciel, she's got people from home, but I do wonder, without Gustave, all she's got is this fog and that she can't see through, and she doesn't know what direction they're going in, she doesn't know what's actually going on, and she no longer has, excuse the pun, but she no longer has her rock, who has been the one making her, like giving her that feeling of steadiness next to her. We obviously saw at the end of the last episode, she seems very angry, and I think she's going to ride that anger, and that's going to fuel her for a while. I think rather than having Gustave as her rock, I think now she's going to be just leaning into vengeance and revenge. As we've seen so far, I don't think things are going to be as simple as that, and I think she might get to a point where she finds out more or comes to some realization, and realizes that it's not as straightforward as good versus bad, vengeance. Maybe finds out her place or part in all of this. Maybe Renoir was right and killing Gustave was a kindness, and she'll find out why, and that burning rage to get vengeance on him will fade. I don't know, but I think while she's angry, it's not going to be healthy for her, but I think at least she has that to keep her going. and she's no longer going to have steady Gustave by her side to cheer her up and calm her down and remind her that she's okay. And although she has Sciel and Lune, I feel like Gustave really was her piece of home more than anybody else, so without that I guess she's untethered, and I don't know. Or maybe even if she finds out that Gustave was killed for a reason, or it was the kind of thing, if Renoir was telling the truth, maybe she won't care. Maybe she's beyond reasoning. Maybe it doesn't matter if it was for the greater good or a kindness. As far as she's concerned, Renoir took Gustave from her, and nothing will ever logic that away. I find it interesting that it refers to them as Maelle's nightmares, not Maelle's dreams. It implies that they are uncomfortable, scary, traumatic, painful, something negative that she is feeling when she has them. I do think that she's been here on the continent before. I do believe she has a history with Verso. I don't think they're premonitions. I think that they are memories, maybe mishmashed together or not quite chronological or maybe blended, but I do think they are things she remembers but is maybe suppressed or is maybe forgotten somehow. It would explain why Verso swooped in when Maelle was going to get killed or hurt, but not when Gustave was. Another reason I'm a little bit angry at him as well. If he'd have shown up a few minutes sooner, I could have saved them both, but no. Maelle doesn't seem to remember him or seem to find him familiar, apart from maybe from her dreams. I think for the time being, Maelle is just going to see him as a tool to get her revenge. He seems to be experienced with Renoir, with the continent. He seems to know like the best way to get to the paintress, and I think for now he is just a means to the end, which is getting vengeance on avenging Gustave's death. But I think over the course of the story, I don't know if she'll start to remember and regain her memories. I don't know if Verso will tell her, or maybe she'll never regain those memories and he won't tell her, but they'll just form a new bond from scratch. I do think they're going to become close. I obviously don't know their dynamic from before. He has light-coloured eyes, that's one thing I noticed. She also has light-coloured eyes. That is the only similar feature I see between them, but a part of me did think, are they related? Was he like, I don't know what the age difference would be, but like her dad or big brother or something? Or, I mean, people can just both have blue eyes, it's allowed. Maybe they were lovers? Maybe they're going to be lovers? I don't know. So, I don't know. I'm open to the consideration that they may be related, but also to the consideration that they're not. And that maybe they were romantically involved, maybe they will be romantically involved. But I think that they are going to become close in some way. Either from the past, coming back to the surface, or from what unfolds in the future. And just that alone bringing them together is what I think. I've touched on this before, but another theory I have is I think Maelle also doesn't age. And I have two sub-theories on this. I think theory A is that she just doesn't age. I'm still not entirely sure how nobody noticed, but also I don't think it's been confirmed when she met Gustave or how old she was. So maybe it's just not been long enough, but I find it seems like her and Gustave are close enough. They've been together for a few years at least. And yet, I think you'd notice if somebody in their sort of mid-teens wasn't aging. It's a time when people are aging quite fast, visually. Or, theory B, she didn't age and was there for Expedition Zero. But whatever happened to... for whatever reason she can't remember for whatever reason she ended up on Lumiere and away from the continent. Maybe she began aging again. So maybe she was quite young when she did meet Gustave and has aged, but maybe it was more like the clock restarted, or like the clock continued. She froze, didn't age for 67 years or however long, then ended up back on Lumiere, and then the clock commenced. Maybe if the paintress does choose who stays unchanged or who doesn't, maybe it's a proximity thing on Lumiere. So maybe she was there with them all those years ago. Somehow ended up back on Lumiere and either continues to not age or didn't age but started to once she was back on Lumiere and met Gustave and Emma and did deliveries or something, I think she mentioned before. So I think a lot about what I said about Maelle before, I think still stands, but I think we've seen a lot more unfold since then. I don't think I've seen her personality change too much. I think it's more just her connection to this place and the people and Gestrels and Nevrons and Curator and so on of this continent that I've seen change. I think her personality has stayed much the same. She's kind of never looked back at Lumiere, wanted to stay by Gustave's side. She's very confident and very hardened on the outside, but we have seen moments where the vulnerability shows through. I think all of that has stayed much the same. One really sweet but sad thing that I noticed is they both promised each other, or both said or implied that they were both going to run away as soon as they saw Renoir. Neither of them did. When Maelle saw Renoir in camp, she didn't run away. She wanted answers. She couldn't run away when Renoir showed up at the Stonewave Cliffs. But Gustave could have done, and he stayed and just wanted answers. It's almost like they're both so alike in such like a sweet but also tragic way. Neither of them was ever gonna run away and leave the other person there, were they? It's like they both wanted each other to make the promise, but I think they both knew full well that they probably weren't going to keep their side of the promise. They just didn't necessarily know that the other person wasn't going to. Okay, next I want to focus on Lune. So let's awkwardly just stand in front of her and stare her down. Actually, I kind of like that view, and then it's like we're both stood together looking out at the monolith. It's a bit more scenic. Although I keep getting a really creepy bit of music. Can you hear that? I don't know if it's because I'm close to the curator or something. Sounds like haunted music. We're just gonna have to deal with the hauntedness. Okay, so last time we had met Lune and had like one conversation with her, and I knew she played guitar, but she was just one of all the rest of the expeditioners at the time. I didn't really know much about her personality. I definitely didn't realise she was going to join the party. So I never really covered her before, even though she was around back then. I just realised, when I talk, I often fiddle with my rings or something. I realised I've just put 2 rings on one finger without realising. I thought that felt weird. There we go. Lune is my favourite character. I think I might have mentioned that before. I don't think there's any characters I dislike. No, there's no character that I would rather was not in the game so far. I have mixed feelings about some of them. I like some more than others, but I like all of them overall. Lune is my favourite though. I find her so relatable. I'll get into that in a bit. She has such a big picture perspective, and not in the same way that Sophie did. I think Sophie was a bit more big picture, sort of emotionally, or like with regards to like fairness and willpower and autonomy and stuff. I think Lune is more logical than emotional with her perspective. She's so rational, and I think she tries to remove the emotional weight of situations and focuses just on what's right, what's wrong, what's for the greater good. In pretty much all of her decisions, she's not thinking about what's most important to me. She's thinking about what is best for the most people. What is the right choice for Lumiere and our entire civilization, not just for me personally, with my own priorities and my own feelings. I think we've seen like Gustave kind of think, heck everybody else, Maelle is the most important to me, or this is how I feel. And Lune, despite being human and still feeling this, like all of it, she's very good at pushing that down and thinking, yes, obviously I want my people to survive, I want to survive, but I am just one life, they are just a few lives, and I need to consider the lives of all of us. And that seems to be what drives her decision and her choices, which is a skill. It's very difficult to do that. She's so responsible, she's so smart, and she's so fair as well, because that's true. Like, I know we'd all love to say that, you know, we'd always make the right choice if we're put in a situation like that, but I think honestly most people, most humans would choose their family or their partner or their children or their dog, or, you know, anyone who they feel really emotionally attached to over the lives of many more strangers. I think we would all prioritize the people we love over our civilization or country or town or anything. And I think Lune is really, really skilled at putting those emotions to one side and looking at the bigger picture and thinking what is the best for the most people. Because yes, for me, these are the most important people, but to somebody else, they feel the exact same about their family, and who am I to choose my family over theirs, essentially. And I admire her so much for that. I really love that she does that. I feel like that's kind of makes her the foundation and like the rock of this expedition, I think. So many of them are avoidant or biased because of their emotions and their attachments, and I feel like Lune is the one person keeping things on track and always prioritizing logically what is right to do over the emotional pull that everybody else is feeling towards other options. And I feel like she's the one keeping them focused, keeping them on track, because I think she's the only person I've seen in the expedition who does that. We know that she does feel emotions. You know, she clearly was feeling the guilt of her choice of landing, which ended up being the scene where the beach attacked. Of course, that's not her fault, but I can see why she would feel it was. And we saw that that was weighing on her. We could see, it broke my heart, but you could see how torn up she was after Gustave's death. But again, she almost like tried to push it away and just go straight back to, you know, we need to update the records and the journals, and like we should start, you know, she's just going straight back into like no emotions, no feelings, just mission, mission, mission. But like I said, she is a human being, and you can't always switch off how you're feeling. I think she's always trying so hard to do the responsible thing. I think she does partly go back to the mission and everything for her own sake. I think she finds a lot of reassurance and comfort, and I think she finds it calming to crunch numbers and work on strategies and lean into the logic. I'm very much the same, so I can understand that. Sometimes if I'm stressed about something, I need to create a plan or a schedule or work out the data, and then I feel a lot better having that structure. And I think maybe she's a bit like that as well. I think some of it is to do with her trying to calm herself down by leaning on data and leaning on logic. But there are times where that doesn't fix everything. Things like grief, you can't just spreadsheet your way out of grief, or like sometimes you do just need to sit with the discomfort, sit with the raw emotions and let them run through you. And it's not pleasant, but you can't just push it down forever and only lean on, like, we're not robots essentially. And it makes me wonder if she's going to keep pushing down all the things she's feeling because she sees them as not helpful or distracting or diverting from what they should be focusing on, or maybe it's just her way of not sitting with that intense emotion, because they don't disappear when you push them to one side or compartmentalize them. They stay there. It will either get to a boiling point and she won't be able to keep pushing it down anymore. It will get to a point where her human nature takes over and is like, enough is enough. And then she's got all of that unprocessed raw emotion that can just trigger at some point. Or it can start... I don't think this will happen in a game, but in real life it can start showing up in your health, your physical health. So there are more ways than I can even conceive of, I'm sure, for how chronic stress and unregulated, compartmentalized emotions can start to show up in your physical health. Again, I don't think that will happen in the game because that almost feels a bit too mundane and real lifey to show up in a game like this. But yeah, I feel like it's going to go one of two ways. Actually, no, one of three ways. I think she's either going to not make it long enough for us to find out. I really hope that's not the case because I love her and I want her to see it through to the end. The thing I think is quite likely to happen is maybe she'll just explode at one point. Not literally, I hope, but maybe she'll keep trying to be calm and be logical and rational and push down these feelings and not face them, and then eventually it will just get too much and she'll just lose it and lose control. Or three, yeah, maybe it will show up in like health or something, but again, I can't see them bringing that into a game because it's not particularly exciting or interesting. It's just kind of sad. So I don't think that will happen. Or maybe I'm looking way too much into this, and nothing will happen at all and she'll see it through to the end and just keep being as she is. But I just think in real life you can't just keep doing that. If you keep going through really traumatic stuff and just pretending you're okay, and like to yourself as well as other people, like telling yourself you're fine and pushing it down and not dealing with it, something's going to give at some point. One of my favourite parts of the game so far, not like big story moments, but in terms of how the characters are played, was after the first cutscene in camp, where Maelle met Alicia and Renoir for the first time. And I loved how the different characters dealt with Maelle's distressed state when she came back from that and they were all aware and conscious again. I don't think anybody was right or wrong in that situation, but they handled it differently. Gustave, like I said, I think when it comes down to it, given the ultimatum, he will always put the people he loves first. Maelle especially. He saw she was distressed. Yes, she had really useful information, but his priority was going into like dad mode or big brother mode and like reassuring her, calming her down, making sure she felt safe and knew she was okay. Nothing else mattered to him in that moment. I'll go into Sciel's personality and what I think of her in a bit, but she's very insightful and I think she could see that the last thing Maelle needed right now was an interrogation, and to keep that scenario going in her mind, I think she knew that Maelle needs to know that it's over. She's very socially attuned and switched on to what's going on with people, but she also seems to be a bit of a peacekeeper. I think for her the priority was calming everyone down and trying to find a peaceful resolution to the situation. Lune, I think, almost came across as the person in the wrong in that cutscene, but I don't think she was. I think it just depends what your priorities are. Yes, what she was saying to Maelle was not best for Maelle, and the last thing anybody in that situation needs is this sort of like the scariness to keep going. But Lune's perspective is on what's best for everybody, and I don't think it's that she didn't realise that Maelle was stressed. I don't think it's that she didn't realise that Maelle could probably do with calming down, but I think in Lune's mind, Maelle is one person and she is carrying the fate of, or they are carrying the fate of all of Lumiere, which is many people, and I think it's kind of for the greater good to kind of distress Maelle for a few minutes longer, but get some really good information that could be what turns the tide of this whole expedition. Something that Maelle could tell them could be the difference between winning or losing, or achieving their goal or not achieving their goal. One thing that has become horrendously obvious is that they need more information. They are so clueless of what's going on, and our enemies always seem to be 5 steps ahead of us. So any information we get could give us the edge that we need. So I don't think it's that she was just totally oblivious to the fact that Maelle had just gone through something and probably needed some comforting. But I think Lune kind of thought, yeah, it sucks, I'm sorry to have to do this to you, but get talking, because we're carrying the lives of so many people, and at the end of the day I'd rather you were stressed for a bit longer and had a hard time, but all of us survive, rather than, you know, we wrap you up in a blanket and make you feel better, but potentially then everyone dies. I think that's kind of like her perspective, and I get it. To be honest, I feel like this probably isn't going to be a popular opinion, but I kind of, if I was there, I feel like as much of a jerk as I would seem, I'd be leaning a bit more towards Lune's approach. I'd probably calm Maelle down first, but I wouldn't wait all night. I'd kind of be like, it's okay, you're not there anymore, have a hot chocolate, now get talking. So I get where Lune was coming from. And like I said, I don't think there is a right or wrong way to deal with that situation. I feel like they were all trying to do their best and trying to do what they thought was the right thing. It just depends whether your priority is looking out for your team or looking out for all of Lumiere. You know, who's to say? I think Lune lights together as much information as she can before she takes any action or makes any decisions that could have consequences. I don't think she's somebody who likes to just wing it. I think she likes to have as much information, as much knowledge, as much clarity as possible. I think that's where she feels the most calm and the most confident. We obviously saw that conversation between her and Gustave. She was saying something about, you know, there's so much they don't know and they need to find out more. Gustave was like, let's just kill the paintress and figure that out afterwards. But I think she's very aware of how little they know, that the situation may not be as it appears, and I think she wants that information before they do anything drastic. Either because this might be me imposing my own theories on Lune now, but maybe because maybe the paintress isn't who she seems, maybe their enemies aren't as black and white as it seemed. Or it could be as simple as, even if she believes that that's all still the case, they could still take an action that ends up getting one of them killed or putting them at a disadvantage. So I don't know how far she's considering the mystery and ambiguity to have gone. Maybe she really doesn't know what the situation is now and wants to learn like who the paintress is, and is she actually bad, and who Renoir and Alicia are and what's their part in it. Or maybe she just still thinks of them all as enemies and all, we still need to go and kill the paintress, but she just is scared that we're going to do something and then end up paying the price for it and regretting that we didn't take a bit longer to get the information first. I think she would rather take a bit more time and do things properly and thoroughly and well, rather than charging in hot-blooded and end up getting all killed and just becoming another expedition that didn't make it. Lune, for me, is so relatable to my own personality and how I approach things. I think that's partly why she's my favourite character. Also just because she looks really cool, I like her tattoos, I like that she's barefoot, love that she floats, love her fighting style. There's so much I like about her. But also that in most situations, when there's a disagreement or they all have different approaches, I'm normally with Lune. In most cases. One area where me and Lune do diverge. It's going to sound a little bit contrasting to what I just said about her wanting to take time to gather more information before taking action. I think that is the case with like the bigger mission, but we saw that she gets very, very task focused when it comes to the next step. So I think this is the only time, but the one time I've been like, damn it, Lune, was after the arena when Gustave and Sciel are talking about how they both blacked out and both woke up in completely separate places with no memory of how they got there or who took them there.
Hey, how'd you end up here?
Oh, after the beach, I ended up in an odd yellow forest, not too far from here. Had to dodge a few Nevrons, but luckily I met a Gestrel who guided me here. What about you?
Well, I woke up next to a waterfall and...
We can talk later.
No, talk
Let's
now.
get back to Golgra.
No time to lose.
Okay. And I felt like we were finally going to get some answers, because that's the weird thing, is we don't only not know what's going on the continent and what's going on with Renoir and Alicia and the Paintress. We don't even know what's going on with ourselves. We've got gaps in our memory and don't understand how certain things have happened to us. And it could all be connected. We could find clues if we find out what happened to us that start to unpack or unpick what's going on with all the other stuff. It felt like it could be such a key bit of information, and they just start getting into it, and then Lune's like, chop chop everyone, come on, we've got to go and see Golgra or something, and it's just like, Lune. That was a moment where I feel like, unlike her usual let's take our time and find out more, she was like, we've got a task, let's go and see the task through. But we could have gone to see the task through afterwards. I don't think the 15 minutes would have made a difference, but we could have had a huge benefit to having that conversation. I feel like it was almost put in there to like build the suspense and make you start to question what happened, almost a bit of a tease. But if we're taking things at face value, I feel like Lune maybe didn't think that one through. I think she maybe gets a bit tunnel visioned at times. So yeah, overall, I love her character. She is my favourite character. She's not perfect, but I kind of like that they all have their own flaws and all of their personalities feel very human. They all seem to have their own strengths, but then also have their own weaknesses, or at least different angles and perspectives and priorities. And I really love that because it makes them more immersive as characters. I feel like she's going to carry on being the steady, logical rock of the group, the one keeping them on track, the one pointing out risks and gaps in their strategy. She's very knowledgeable. I do think, though, if she keeps on compartmentalizing and trying to push down all of the uncomfortable emotions from the less pleasant things that they go through, I do feel like she might end up reaching a breaking point. I don't want to see what that looks like, but I feel like that might end up happening. Or, like we kind of saw Sciel do last time, because Sciel is very good at picking up on what's really going on with people, this will be quite transformative for Lune as well, and over time she'll start to become a bit more comfortable with her more human nature, and grieving together as a group as well. Because they're all going through it, and I think Lune should just let herself go through it with them. They've all lost a friend and a companion. And the mission is still important, but they can have a night to grieve. I don't think the night's going to make a difference. So yeah, I'm very curious to see how it ends up. I feel like she is such a keystone of the group, but she needs to look after herself. I think for all of her intelligence, I think she could do with a bit of wisdom there as well. Let's get away from that creepy music. That leads me nicely onto Sciel. At first, I feel a bit bad for this. I was very, very quick to decide how I felt about Sciel, and I feel like I was wrong. When I first met her, I kind of just took her for an adrenaline junkie. I thought maybe this whole, like, going to fight the Paintress was less about the cause and more because Lumiere was kind of dull and this would be exciting and an adventure. She obviously, when they got to the beach and all of that happened, we found that she had just spent the rest of the time since she woke up fighting in the arena. So I kind of thought, that's not very responsible, but she seems just like a wild card who just wants to have fun and do very adrenaline fueling things and loves the excitement and the extrovertedness and stuff. But I think I mentioned this during that episode. I feel like that was an unfair first impression. I don't even think it's just that she wanted to kill the paintress but just thought I probably can't and decided to just have fun and enjoy her last year instead. I've actually come to find her a very interesting character. I know she's not in my party, but that doesn't seem to affect the cutscenes and stuff you get with her. So I still seem to see all of her involvement with like the cutscenes and dialogue and so on. Just not her in fights. I find her so interesting. And again, like with the others, I find her so much deeper and with so many more layers than my initial first impression and what she shows to everybody else. In fact, she seems to be someone who always tries to act okay and always tries to make light of the situation, the sort of mood lifter, the comedian, the one who's always, I don't know, she's confident, she's fun, she makes people laugh. She always has kind of jokey, witty ways of saying things. I think it's a front to herself and to others that she always acts okay and always acts like nothing is a big deal, when it clearly is such a big deal. She clearly has fears. I feel like things like the arena, like I mentioned before, I think she was there because she didn't want to face the mission or the expedition again. I think what she went through was so much, it was easier to stay in the arena, which felt like a different place, a different world, totally unrelated to everything she'd just been through, rather than to go back to where all of that had happened, or the people who'd just been through it, and then face that it really happened and be reminded of it. We know that she's afraid of water or swimming, but she always tries to downplay it. She's like, oh, I don't suppose you've got any wine stashed away, rather than just saying, I don't want to do this, I'm really afraid, and being serious and very transparent about how she feels. She still tries to almost like be at least half jokey about it. I wonder if that's just her personality, or if for some reason she, like in the past, was made to feel like she can't fully show herself and she has to pretend like everything is okay. She has to always seem strong or unfazed by things, or like everything's okay. And it's kind of, it's sort of learnt behaviour that she has to downplay everything and nothing can seem too serious or like it affects her too much. We obviously don't know much about what Sciel's been through, but I wonder, or maybe it's just who she is as a person. But it seems almost like she's trying to, sort of hide a lot of her vulnerability, or is avoiding things being too deep or too serious or too real. But I mean, this expedition, does it get more deep and vulnerable and serious and real? Like this is probably the most abrasive thing that any of them will ever go through, and it's okay to say that this is terrifying, or she's scared, or she's sad, or feels hopeless, but she's always acting okay. I mean, I'm no psychologist at all, but I wonder if maybe she had I don't know, younger siblings, and she always had to try and make them feel like everything was okay, so she's just kind of adopted that personality. Or maybe she was vulnerable once and something bad happened, so now she tries to hide it. Maybe nothing bad happened, but she just ended up this way. But I don't know, I'd be curious to know what happened to her, or sort of what does that to somebody. But there's two sides to her. There's a side she shows outwardly, and I think there's a side of what's going on inside, really. She is also very good at reading people, or connecting the dots with people without necessarily being told. Like, she knew what happened to Gustave. She knew that he almost killed himself, and he said, oh, did Lune tell you? And she was like, no, I just connected the dots, like I just knew. I feel like she's very observant and picks up on what other people are trying to also hide. And again, is that just a skill she naturally developed? Or did she have to become very socially hypervigilant and being able to like read people and figure out what's really going on because of something. She gives me kind of like big sister vibes. That's why I wondered about maybe if she became that way because she had younger siblings who she needed to reassure that everything was okay or something. I also can't help but notice that she has a white ribbon in her hair, and in Maelle's first nightmare we saw Maelle screaming at the monolith, clutching what looked to be a white ribbon. And I hope that doesn't mean Sciel dies. But at this point, nothing's off limits, right? Nobody's off limits, no one's safe. And the fact that Maelle seemed to be on her own as well, I wonder if they're all going to die. Or like Sciel and Lune at least, the original expeditioners. And Maelle might be the only one who makes it. I don't know, I'm just guessing. But yeah, she commented as well about how Gustave and Sophie were like inseparable during the Aquafarm 3 project. Like, I feel like she seems like she doesn't care and is just here for a good time. But I think she does watch people, and I think she picks up on things. Yeah, like how she comes across and what is actually going on, I think are a bit different. Not in like a deceitful way. I don't think she's trying to manipulate anybody. But I think she just is very insightful, very perceptive. And just very good at picking up on things that a lot of other people think that they're hiding really well or think that nobody will notice. I could be wrong, but I do think maybe she had a crush on Gustave. But I don't know. They go back a long way. Sometimes like a really close long-term friendship can come across as flirtatious or being attracted to each other, but it's really just history and familiarity. But I don't know, I was getting the impression that I think she liked Gustave. I'm standing by that. That's my guess, is that she liked Gustave. I really want to know why she's so scared of water. Not that anybody needs a reason to be scared of something, but I wonder if something happened and it gave her that fear of water. Because it's the way, I don't know, it's the way she keeps mentioning it. Like, I'm sure someone in this party is probably scared of spiders, but we've never heard of it. No one's ever said, oh, by the way, did I tell you? But she keeps mentioning water, which makes me think like it's not like a normal everyday fear that somebody, like a rational fear that someone has. I don't know, I wonder if like she almost drowned once, or maybe it's just she's never liked water. I'm sure some people go their whole lives without necessarily a reason, but just really, really hating or fearing something. From what I can remember, when she talked about it, it sounded like I swear she talked about to Gustave and mentioned about how he already knew she was afraid of water, and that was the case before the beach attack. So I don't think it's because of what happened on the beach. I think she already had a fear of water since Lumiere. But I wonder if something happened to make her scared of water. They are obviously by the coast, so maybe she, I don't know, almost drowned or got swept out to sea. I'm also really curious as to, Esquie knows her, but she doesn't seem to remember Esquie. She seems to subconsciously, I don't know, I can't remember, there's something she said or did that seemed like she maybe knew Esquie, but wasn't aware that she knew Esquie.
Bonjour, mes amis.
Hey, bonjour mon ami.
Sciel?
What? I don't know. He seems nice.
Oh, it's you. Hello again, my terrible swimmer friend. You finally come to learn to swim?
No.
When they went into Esquie's nest as well, with all the lanterns hanging from the cavern, she mentioned having a strange feeling as well as Maelle. Almost like maybe she'd been there before. So my theory is that she ended up in the water after the beach attack. Either she got cast into the water, or maybe that was her attempt of trying to get away. She thought, I'm either going to stay on the beach and die, or I can try swimming for it and hoping I get away. And maybe Esquie saved her and was the one who got her away from the water and into the forest with the yellow trees. Esquie did say something like, oh, my water-fearing friend or something. So he seems to know about her fear of water. But the one hole I have in that theory is Esquie is notoriously lazy. Why would he save, like, I mean, he didn't save Gustave. I'm still annoyed. I am annoyed at Esquie, by the way. He was right there, and I know the Lampmaster appeared and everything. What was stopping Esquie from putting Lune and Sciel back up on the cliff? We saw he absolutely tanked that other thing. He could handle a Lampmaster that had already been pretty much finished off twice. Or, I mean, if Sciel and Lune could jump that far down to Esquie, I'm sure they could get themselves onto the cliffs and fight the Lampmaster, and then Esquie could go back up and save Gustave. I feel like he could have done more. And, I mean, there's been fights as well that he could have saved us from, but just let us die, so I'm taking it personally. Esquie is not to be trusted. I don't think he's against us. I also think he's unreliable. But my point is, if he cared so little about us dying, and was so lazy that he just doesn't want to save us when we are literally in mortal danger, and we're right there, why would he go out of his way to pluck Sciel from the ocean and drop her off? Like, if he's that level of lazy, why would he go to that level of effort? It doesn't sound very in character for Esquie, but I can't think of how else Sciel would have survived, and how Esquie would also know about her hating water or not being good at swimming or whatever it was he said. Was it terrible swimmer friend? I've forgotten what he called her, but it was her and water he seemed to know about. And it still doesn't explain how we ended up separated. Did someone or something else find Gustave, or was Esquie doing like delivery runs, picking us up and dropping us off, but all in different places, which doesn't make much sense. It's as best as I've got for now, but I don't think it's a very strong theory. Or I feel like I at least need some other stuff to fill in the gaps before it feels like a good theory. I still need to get the hang of Sciel's fighting style. I'm still absolutely clueless. But I really like her fighting style. I love the whole thing with like the cards and fortune. I love how she looks. Like her tattoos, the bracelets. She does have that really cool, like, confident big sister sort of vibes. She's not in my main party, but I do really like her as a character. And I feel very bad for being so harsh with my first impression. There's so much more to her than I think I gave her credit for, and I should have waited a bit longer and got to know her a bit better before summarising what I thought of her, so I will do better in future. Right. Verso. I obviously have only just met Verso, so I may eat my words very quickly, but I will go over what I think of him so far, my guesses as to what he's like as a person, and my guesses as to his involvement or trajectory, where I think this story is going to go with him. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear, but my voice is going a bit. I think I've been talking for a long time already, so bear with me while I continue to lose my voice. I think a little bit like Sciel, but more cynical and sarcastic. I think he's going to be a character that has been through a lot, is quite, I don't know, emotionally or psychologically scarred, maybe hurting inside, but is hiding behind a front of wit and sarcasm and acting like he's fine. I've only seen a very, very tiny amount of him so far. He mentioned, again, kind of in like a blasé way, I can't remember what he said, but it was something like, oh, it gets a bit depressing, or it gets a bit boring or lonely to like keep burying everybody you love, sort of thing.
Burying everyone you know while you live on can weigh you down a bit.
He does seem to be able to be genuine. He kind of said, oh, it's like a funny way of thanking somebody, but then said, like, I'm sorry about your friend. So I think he's kind of one of those like dry, sarcastic humour, like banter, maybe because life's just made him very cynical, I don't know, I feel like that would make for a very interesting character. I guess as well, he has, like, he probably wasn't wrong about burying his friends, or the people he knew. He's from Expedition Zero, so they took off and came to the continent 67 years ago. So imagine spending 67 years on this continent. He's not alone, but it sounds like he's not close with the others, or at least not Renoir and Alicia. They said, like, you walked away and, like, it's been a while and stuff. So it sounds like he's become a bit of a lone wolf, or sort of just gone off by himself. That must be lonely. And also, I imagine not aging, not knowing when you're going to die. Most of us have, none of us know when we're going to die, but we have a rough idea of, like, your average life expectancy. We know that probably most of us aren't going to live beyond a century. Who knows with them? I mean, I don't know how old he's supposed to be, but let's say he's like 30, 40, I don't know. And they left 67 years ago. He's already like a century old, basically. And still going strong, so that must be kind of... Life would, like, change its meaning, wouldn't it? Time would change for you, like, the meaning of time would change for you. It would no longer be, like, the things I want to achieve before I die, or I hope I can hit these milestones, or here's what I want my life to look like. It's like, will his life end? And also, it's not like he can start up a business, or get married and have kids, or travel the world. I suppose you can travel the continent, but it's like, it sounds like he's stuck in this place with time maybe frozen, his age frozen, alone. It sounds like he's gone through experienced a lot of death around him, and has probably felt a bit left behind. Sounds like he was burying other people, but doesn't know when he himself will die. That's gotta do something to a person, right? Like, psychologically. I'm intrigued to know how that feels. Obviously, I cannot possibly know how that feels. I wonder if he's, like, come to terms with it, if he hates his existence now. I wonder if he is eager to die so he can be done with this life, or... I wonder if he's like Renoir and likes the fact that he's got this existence, but maybe just doesn't want it for everybody else. I know he said it gets a bit old, like burying everyone you love sort of thing, but I don't know if that's just him with humour, or if, like, actually he is tired and wants it to be over. But what an interesting concept. It's also going to be so interesting because they've all come from the same place and the same life, kind of, apart from maybe Maelle. We're figuring that out. But, like, they all came from Lumiere, where things were one way. You know, you're born, you gamage, you try and have a life in between. He is the only one in the party, as far as we know, maybe Maelle, who has this entirely different existence. And memories from back then as well, which we were all relying on the journal and sort of what's been noted down and passed down to us. Obviously nobody in Lumiere is alive who was alive back then because of the gamage. So he's going to be a wealth of knowledge and memory, depending on how much he's willing to share. And it will be interesting to see if he thinks differently to us, or he is an expeditioner who set off on the mission 67 years ago to defeat the Paintress, and has been on the continent all this time, and doesn't seem loyal to the Paintress like Renoir is, for selfish or whatnot reasons, but has not yet killed her or been killed. So did he not think he could do it by himself? Did he initially not want to kill her anymore, but now it's got a bit old and he's changed his mind? It will be interesting to see how an expeditioner from Expedition 0 works alongside Expedition 33. He seems to have either an alliance or a kind of understanding or truce with Renoir. And I'm not this time going to say that Renoir is nice to him and is going to leave him alone, because I feel like I feel like I said that last time and sort of invited fate to come along and prove me wrong. But Verso showed up out of nowhere, unexpectedly, when Renoir hadn't seen Verso in quite a long time. And he directly interfered with what Renoir was trying to do, blocked Renoir's attack, and even after... and let Maelle get away. And even after Maelle got away, you'd think Renoir would be annoyed, right? Or angry. But he didn't seem to make any attempt to lash out at Verso. He didn't yell at him. He didn't take a swing at him. It seems to me like stopping Maelle is important for Renoir. And Verso was a literal obstacle. And Verso even said about the paintress, she'll never paint again. Like, that's a threat. If Renoir is so determined to protect the paintress, that is Verso saying, like, she's going to die. And it seems like Verso is going to help that happen. But Renoir still didn't attack, didn't yell at him or lose his temper. And I don't know if Renoir is just extremely in control of his emotions and is playing the long game. Maybe they are actually, I don't know, for old time's sake, or maybe for whatever relationship they have now. Maybe they are still comrades or family or a team. And they don't see this as a big enough deal to come in between them. But interesting. I would have thought, from what little I understand, from the situation I saw before me, I would have thought that would put Verso on the opposing side to Renoir. I would have thought Renoir would at least yell at him and be like, you idiot. But he was just like, fine, if this is what you choose, if you can accept these consequences.
So that's it. You've set us down this path. But are you ready for the consequences?
She'll never paint again.
I don't know, he didn't seem personally enraged by it. But it sounds like it's personally going to affect him if we kill the paintress. I don't know. Or maybe it's just because they are both from Expedition Zero and there's not many of them left, and if they keep on easily getting triggered and killing each other, then they are going to end up alone. They don't want to so quickly wipe out the only people who are probably going to continue to exist with them if they really don't age or die or anything. I assume as well that they don't age but can die if they get... I mean, Renoir, as much as I was barely taking anything off his health bar, he did have a health bar, so I'm guessing if something strong enough kills them, they can die. But they just won't die naturally from old age. I'm still not quite sure what his relationship is with Maelle. I do think that they know each other, met in the past. She doesn't remember. I think he does. Oh, but was it a premonition? Because I was just saying about Sciel and the ribbon, but if it was in the past, then is it what's going to happen, or is it what's already happened? She did dream of the monolith being 100. Oh, I don't know. Verso only showed up when she was about to get attacked. But he's not said, do you remember me? Or... go on, Maelle. Like, he doesn't seem to have given away that he knows her. So maybe she can see the future somehow. Or... maybe he's just got a good poker face. And they have met before. I don't think this is like strange or unusual, unexplained or mysterious or anything, but just interesting about, I suppose, different human perspectives. How to Renoir, his ageless existence is like a blessing, like a gift that he wants to keep. Whereas for Verso, he seems to view it more as a curse, like he can't age and die. But then if he can die from like being killed, I'm sure he could like choose to fall on his own sword if he really wanted to that badly. So I don't think it's that he like absolutely is done with this and just wants to die somehow. Because surely he could kill himself if that was the case. or go on some kind of like killing spree until a Nevron took him down or something. So I wonder if he just, I don't know, just wants to grow old? Maybe doesn't want to die, but just wants to grow old and needs the paintress to die for that to happen. Or maybe he just doesn't want to die so needlessly and wants it to mean something. I don't know. Interesting. Interesting, two very different takes, despite that they've both probably been through quite similar things over the last 67 years. Which takes me to Renoir. That's right, he gets a mention as well. I obviously know so little about Renoir. It feels dangerous to start making assumptions about him. I don't think he's a black and white evil character. I don't think he's just out to kill anybody who opposes the paintress just for the sake of it. And I think what we've seen so far has kind of confirmed that. He seems to care a lot about his family. He seems to like not aging and is protecting the paintress because she is the key to that staying in place as far as we know. He seems very close to Alicia and caring of her. And like I said, he gave Maelle chances. If he was just that bloodthirsty, I think he would have just killed them all there and then in camp. It seems to be like his priority and his family, the things that really mean a lot to him are his priority. And he doesn't necessarily take any joy in killing people, but he also won't hesitate to do it if it is for his family or to keep him and them safe. Which is good, because I don't like a black and white 2D character. I love it when the baddies, you can also empathise with them a bit. And it seems like Renoir's going to go that way. Again, I don't know if he was telling the truth or if it's accurate when he said that it was a kindness to kill Gustave and not a cruelty. I am so looking forward to finding out more about what he meant by that. Because how brilliant would it be if actually he was doing a good thing by doing such a horrendous thing and we had it wrong this whole time. But I'm also a little bit worried to get my hopes up in case that doesn't happen and I end up disappointed. But again, like I said before, I don't think he is just a baddie. I don't think he's just like a bad guy who likes harming people. I think he's just very human. I think, like I said before, most of us, if we really came down to a situation where we had to choose between our loved ones or the greater good of mankind, I think most people would choose their loved ones. Even people who didn't think they would until that moment, I think if actually faced with the choice, they would choose their loved ones over what's best for everyone else. And I get the impression his story is going to be like that. I think he's somebody who probably just really loves his family and is trying to look out for them. And like heck Lumiere and the rest of these people, I don't know, but that's the impression I get, which is good because that's a very understandable reason. I'm not saying it's justified, but also you can see where he's coming from and it makes it feel a lot more real. And then what did Verso mean as well when he said to Renoir, they're not your family, but she is? Who is they? I don't know, I'm so excited to find out, but once again, I feel like I've just been given so much and just have so many more questions. I don't feel like I'm any closer to figuring it out. I really want to know how Renoir got his scar. Is it a scar on his eye? Or it looks like he's got an injured eye. And his cane, which may just be a weapon or just for style, or could be because he has an injury. I mean, it's very likely he could have just been injured since coming here to the continent. But Expedition Zero took off right after the fracture. So he would have been alive, actually all of them would have been alive around the time of the fracture. They may know how it happened. Depends, I don't know if they were there at the time or elsewhere. But it could possibly be that Renoir got those injuries from whatever happened in the fracture. Maybe he was involved or fought or was around and got injured during the time of the fracture and then went over with the expedition immediately afterwards, or within the next year afterwards, for Expedition 0, and that's where his injuries came from. Or maybe he came over fit and healthy and got those injuries from the continent during his many years here. And my last one is Esquie. I don't have a whole lot to talk about Esquie, but he's just such an unusual, unique character. I think it would be fun to touch on that as well. I also feel like I might upset some people with my thoughts, but I'll be honest, and I'm sorry if some people don't like it. I didn't think much of him at first, or at least I didn't like him very much at first. I feel like he looks silly. My family make fun of me for this, but I like things to make sense. Like I said, I'm a bit like Lune, very logical, very rational. And I don't understand how he can fly. He doesn't have the body shape to be able to fly. Rocks should make you heavier, not able to fly or swim. If anything, they should make that less possible. And I know it's a magic world, it's a fantasy world. Not everything has to make sense, but it irks me because I like to be very logical and I like for things to make sense. There's a film I watched with my parents that they loved, and they were like, oh, she'll really like this. And somebody attaches loads of balloons to their house. You'll probably know if you've seen the film. And the house flies, and all I did was complain about how that's not how that would work. So I'm just one of those people, I'm afraid. So I had issues at first. Also, how he talked to begin with, maybe even a bit now, I find it a little bit silly, but very patronizing. It always sounds like he's talking to me like I'm a baby. And I guess to him, humans are small and we don't live for very long, so okay, maybe that's justified, but I don't like it. I'm an adult and I want to be spoken to like an adult, so I don't know, I just found it very gimmicky and a bit silly, and some people love games and shows and stuff with like that kind of character in it. I like things to stay a bit more real and serious. So for me personally, I can see why people loved Esquie, but for me personally, to begin with, I didn't really enjoy him very much. But, when we got onto the main map, he was actually kind of adorable, and he started to grow on me a bit there. I don't really know why, because he was still being very silly, but it was silly in a way that I liked. When he was kind of belly flopping and being like, I am speed and stuff, like, that it kept making me laugh. So I did actually start to quite like him. I have been told, I told my sister that I didn't like him very much. I think she really likes Esquie, but all she has told me is that give it time, he'll grow on you more. So I'd say right now I slightly like him more than I dislike him. Like, he's, like I said before, there is no character at this point I do not like. I do like him, but I just feel like sometimes he's a bit too much for me, I think. But my sister says he will grow on me in time, so I don't know what will happen. I'll see what happens, but hopefully I continue to like him more and more, and then we'll eventually look back and think, oh my gosh, there was a time where I wasn't too fond of Esquie. Sorry, I don't know if you were getting a bit of a light showing up here. I didn't notice, but the sun's moved and was coming through the window. I also think I'll try and like insert a clip so you can see what I mean. This is a nasturtium seed. It's a flower you can grow. And when he runs around on the main map, the view of him reminds me of a nasturtium seed. I don't know if you can kind of see what I mean, but when he runs around, it reminds me of like a nasturtium seed for some reason. I think it's like how his butt is on the map, but yeah, it just reminds me of a nasturtium seed. But yeah, it just, every time he runs around the map, I don't know if you can see, I've got loads of them. They look like little Esquie butts. But yeah, so I don't dislike him. He's made me laugh a lot. I do find him, he's a very interesting character. He's very funny. Sometimes he's a bit too silly for me. And I think because he always talks in like this really high pitched voice and is like very slow. And I don't know, it just sounds very much like I'm at play school and he's trying to like talk to me like I'm a toddler. But then again, I don't necessarily think that that's unrealistic, because to him we are just toddlers. We're cute tiny little things that don't live for very long and die very easily. So I guess I can kind of understand like the babying talk. But me as the receiver of that talk, I don't like it. But who am I, little human me, to criticize and giant ageless timeless being of great power and longevity. That's my thoughts on Esquie. I feel like a lot of people aren't going to like that. I get the impression that people really love Esquie, especially from the few friends and stuff I've spoken to about him. I feel like people generally really like him. I have started to like him more than I dislike him, but I hope he grows on me some more, because it's near that middle line for me at the moment, I think. Okay, now I want to talk a bit about the world and the story. Not going into sort of all the different events that have happened, and I will touch on like my favourite places earlier, but I just mean as a whole, just as something that came from the mind or minds of people, real people, that once didn't exist, and they have fabricated all of this. And just sort of what I think about this take as a whole. The short story I think is absolutely brilliant. I kind of love that it's based on the real world and France. I think, you know, there are so many fantasy games out there that are completely fantasy, and, you know, that's fine. I enjoy those games, but I kind of like that there's references to the real world as well. It almost feels like an alternative reality, like if we had our world but there was chroma and magic, how it could have turned out. It's just nice to have that connection to things we actually know in our life. It's not completely separate, but it still is separate and fantasy enough to have a lot of the things that this game has that we don't have in real life. But I kind of like that. You've got like the Eiffel Tower and whatnot. The amount of times I've been thinking like, what's going on in like China, or what's going on in Australia right now, or Germany or something. It's like, because this is sort of based on the real world, just a very fantasy alternative universe of it, alternative version of it. It's fun to sometimes think about like, what's it like in England where I live in this world? Like, it's, I don't know, it's just nice. The world itself, I think this is one of the first things I said when I began the game, but I still love how it is such a dance of like beauty and disaster all in one. It's like destruction meets creation, and life combined with death, and things struggling and suffering alongside things flourishing and thriving. And I think the story itself reflects that as well. Visually, the world does. There's all of this like rocks and things torn apart, and buildings just razed and shredded, and all these things that were built or took years to form just destroyed and fractured and blown to pieces. But then we've also seen all the flowers and the trees and the nature and the waterfalls and all of the beautiful things that are still carrying on despite all of this. And I really, really like that. But the story itself, you know, how many times, even within the same cutscene, have we had things that feel so wholesome and warm and cozy alongside things being sad and scary and unsettling. For example, that last cutscene, obviously that was absolutely tragic. Gustave died. It was really heartbreaking, but just before that, you know, we got drawn back to that first scene with Maelle and Gustave. It was wholesome. They were throwing rocks. They were taking just a few minutes together before they moved on to their journey, and you just got to see that sort of warmth and relationship they share. And again, even the story, even the cutscenes and the relationships with the characters is so contrasting. You really get both sides. This isn't just a wholesome game or just a serious, intense game. There's some moments that you feel like a warm bath or like a hot cup of tea or something. It feels so cozy and lovely. And there's other parts that, like I said, genuinely I felt stressed, or I've gone away and felt like I was grieving someone. And I feel like the way that they've written the story reflects how they've designed the world as well. It's got both. It's got everything. Very much like real life. You don't get any one of these things in life without also experiencing the others. Like, everyone's born and gets to live, but then everyone dies as well. Everyone's life is full of ups and downs and joy and sadness and love and tragedy and everything. So it's, I don't know, it's very encompassing, I think, of like the essence of life itself and the world itself and nature itself. And maybe I'm being a bit too poetic or a bit too deep about it, but that's, I think, overall why I really love this game. I think another thing I really love about this story is you almost feel like you are part of the expedition. Like, you start to become as attached to them as they are to each other. You fear for their safety and chances as much as they probably are for their own. But also, I feel like I know as little as they do, or as much as they do. I feel like I'm trying to rack my brain with, like, what is actually happening here? What does this mean? And I feel like the expeditioners equally are like, what's happening? What does this mean? So I feel like it kind of is very good at almost like making you feel how they feel, making you feel like you're there alongside them, feeling what they're feeling, knowing what they're knowing. And again, I think that's largely what makes it such an immersive game. I feel personally invested in this game because I feel emotionally invested in this game. This isn't just like me looking through a screen playing a story. For me, this is like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm so into the story, and when I play, I want to know more, but when there's a cutscene, I genuinely feel tense because I'm like, what's going to happen? I've had goosebumps from some scenes. I've cried at the Gamage. And I know obviously there was a lot going on for me back then as well, but the story, how it's written, the acting, the writing of the scenes, and how it's paced, and how it does have those emotional ups and downs. I feel like it really is really good at drawing you in and making you care about the characters and hope that things turn out okay. Really feeling the abrasiveness of when they get hurt or scared or are going through something, or when they die. You know, you feel the rawness of it, but then you also feel the togetherness of the group when they do have those shared moments, and it kind of feels like you're sat around the campfire with them or throwing rocks with them. I feel like this game is very good at playing on the emotions of the player, and I think that's what makes it so captivating. And of course, I am just started Act 2, so I don't know, maybe it will all change or go downhill or something, but I'm assuming it would be very jarring, I think, for the game to suddenly switch up its style, so I assume that this is going to be consistent for the rest of the game. I imagine the pacing might get a bit faster or more intense, especially near the end, or maybe there'll be bits where everything slows down, but I think overall what I've seen so far is probably going to be an accurate representation of the overall mood and tone and pace and style of the game. I think it's more just what happens in the game that's going to develop, so hopefully that is going to stay consistent. Obviously we are so clueless, maybe not you as the viewer because you've probably played this game before, but me as the player, and once you as the player if you've played the game. I love that at this point we're so clueless. The more we find out doesn't necessarily mean we get closer to really understanding, or at least it doesn't feel that way. But I also love that it's not just, we're not just focused on the paintress and the gamage. We now also want to know about Renoir and Alicia. And it's not just them we want to know about as well. It's also what happened with us and what's going on with Maelle and what happened when we forgot how we ended up in the Spring Meadows or the Yellow Tree Forest. I love that there's so much diversity with the ambiguity, like what we don't know and where our attention is focused. The questions I had at the start of the game, before I knew about Renoir and Alicia, before we had the beach incident and woke up with gaps in our memories, I'm still after those same answers I was asking back then. But now I've also got more questions about other things in other directions. Like I said before, we don't even know what's going on with us, let alone what's going on with Renoir and Alicia, what's going on with the paintress. And I think from my impression of the game and from what people have commented, I think everything will wrap up really nicely by the end. So I don't think this is going to be one of those games that leave you feeling frustrated because you still don't get the answers or things still don't conclude nicely. I think everything is going to click beautifully into place. So I don't feel too anxious about how it's going to end because everyone said that once you finish the game, everything makes sense. So I'm very reassured, and thank you all for commenting that. So I'm not too worried about it. But I kind of like that. I don't know how far through the game I am. Maybe there's 12 acts and I'm still barely getting started, or maybe I'm halfway through or something. But I like that I still feel so clueless. Because when it's like a really predictable game, those games can still be fun. They're not fun in the same way. I love the mental stimulation of trying to figure things out, of feeling as clueless as them. I feel like if this was a very predictable game, it'd be a bit dull. So yeah, I really like how they've done that. But again, I also like that it's not just one thing you're trying to figure out. It's not just the end and destination you're trying to understand. It's also all these things that have cropped up in the meantime, and even things within our own party that we don't understand or remember. I think it adds to the feeling of nervousness and that sort of, hello again. I think it makes us feel as unprepared and unsettled as the party are feeling. But it also means that as things are revealed, we're not necessarily going to understand everything. We may finally find out what happened to us and still not know about Renoir and Alicia or the paintress. Or we might find out about Renoir and Alicia, but still not know how we ended up where we did and what happened after the beach. Hello, Spy. I think the only two things I, so far, I wouldn't even go as far as to say I disliked, but maybe didn't like as much. One is that you get the tutorial for how to play a character in a fight. Often right after a very intense, very impactful scene. So for example, in the cave with Gustave, we were kind of understanding Gustave's state of mind, and like it was really intense because we didn't know if he was gonna to do it. And then Lune showed up and you felt that relief, and I feel like it was such an emotional roller coaster. And then straight after that, you're into a fight and learning how to fight with Lune. And I felt it was just, I almost needed a moment to process what had just happened and come back down from it before I was ready to get back into the battles and fighting and exploring. And then after we met Sciel again, there was that happiness. You were like feeling elevated that we found Sciel and she's okay, and we've got another expeditioner, and does that mean more expeditioners could be out there? And I feel like it would have been nice to sort of ride that high and process that and sort of, again, have some time before going straight into, here's how you fight with Sciel. And I don't know if there's a really straightforward alternative to that. The only thing I could really think of was maybe because obviously you don't want to then go a part of the story, part of the game, not knowing how to fight with them, and then eventually getting the tutorial. It does kind of need to be soon after. But it might have been better if, rather than immediately being like, here's how you fight with this character, maybe not having those fights or those tutorials there, letting you naturally progress on when you're ready and you've had that time, and then the next fight you end up in, because by that point you're choosing to go back into fight, so you've already had your time and feel ready to, and then that first fight after that moment that you go into, then being like, hey, do you want to do the tutorial of how to fight with this character? I think that might have been better. It's only a really small thing. It doesn't make a huge difference. It's not sort of made the game very unimmersive for me or stopped me enjoying it, but I feel like it's more that I don't really pay as much attention to the tutorials because I'm just still focused on like, oh my god, what just happened? And I'm trying to sort of learn, but also my mind is still in another place. So I don't think it's really been that problematic. It just means I don't get as good at fighting with characters, but it's not the end of the world. That's just one small thing that I think could have been, in my opinion, or based on my preferences, done a bit differently. And the other thing, which I don't know if this is really a fair judgment anyway, but I found the Stonewave Cliffs to be quite a tedious, long area. However, it was late. I was tired. I did it all in the one day, so maybe it was just how I was feeling that day. I'd be curious to know what you guys thought of the Stonewave Cliffs, if you felt the same and felt it was a really long stretch that felt quite tedious, or if you're like, it's fine, what was the problem? And also, unlike most of the other areas, which are very bright and colourful and very unique, the Stonewave Cliffs, I loved the moodiness and the dramaticness of it, but also it's not too dissimilar to many places I live near, sort of coastal UK and places. If I go a bit south from where I live, you've got like the Jurassic Coast. I don't live near the Giant's Causeway, but obviously that's a place that exists. So it feels, compared to many of the other areas, to me at least, and from places I've been, probably the most realistic, and therefore maybe the least exciting, because it's kind of like, I've seen this before, I've done this before. It just kind of feels like moody coastal UK. So maybe that's why as well, is it wasn't like, wow, colour and pink trees and stuff like that. Maybe it was just because it's a little more mundane to me, because I've already experienced very similar sort of settings before. It was really cool. It was very moody, very dark and grim and stuff, and I did like it for that reason, but it just felt like it went on and on and on, and didn't really have as much keeping me interested in between. And also I did skip a lot of it. I don't know if I skipped a lot of it, but I wasn't exploring thoroughly. Never came across a mime. And I have seen some comments saying, I suggest you go back and like have a look around. So I'm pretty sure I've missed some stuff. So a lot of that could also be down to me and the choice I made to sort of start rushing through rather carelessly. So that's how I feel, but oh, big yawn. Big yawn. That's how I feel, but I also am not saying that that's a fair judgment or is going to be like the universal opinion of the Stonewave Cliffs. I'm very curious to know if you feel the same though, and if you feel there's any truth to that, or if you think maybe it was just for me, it was just the way the day was, or my personal opinion. I did write down though that I loved the lantern bit when you were walking and all the lanterns were turning on before you got to the Lampmaster. That was actually so cool. And I really loved the sky, and like the open ocean, and it was just so beautiful and so moody, and I don't know, I really loved how that looked. So I didn't dislike the area. I liked that area, but compared to everywhere else, I just found it a bit too lengthy, a bit too unexciting. I think a lot of it as well was like inside the cave, and it was very dark and hard to see. So maybe if it was either a bit shorter or had a bit more going on, or a little bit less in like the really dark caverny spaces, or things to make it zazz it up a bit and make it just a bit more attractive, I think. Would have made it a bit easier. I noticed all the lamps as well, but I thought it was going to be like the camp lanterns. I thought it was just there for vibes. Okay, the combat system. I don't know if you've noticed, but I keep trying to like mix up the background a bit, just so it's not just me stood in front of the campfire for goodness knows how long this is going to be. I've been talking right now for 3 hours and 15 minutes. I'll obviously edit it down loads, but I feel like this is going to be a long video. I am so much more interested in games for the story and the characters than I am for the combat system. I'm not really into hack and slash, kill shit, get loot sort of games. Not my cup of tea at all. Nothing wrong with those games, just really not my style. I love games with really good immersive story, great characters, where I feel like I'm almost playing through a storybook. So when it gets to new combat systems, it almost feels like I'm starting a new job and I have to learn a new system, and I'm like, it just kind of feels like I'm having to do work. Once I've got it, it's fine. But initially it just feels like I'm learning a new task at work and I've got to learn the process and everything. So initially I was like, oh, new combat system. I don't know what AP is. This is all very confusing. But it doesn't take long to get the hang of it. And overall, compared to other games and combat systems I've played, I actually quite like this one. I think it's quite good. My favourite thing, I think, is that every character has their own unique skills and abilities that are totally unique to them. You can sort of have your customization and have a lot of free reign over how you build and design your characters, things like Pictos and so on. But I kind of like that they each have their own individual flair. And I also think, not just in terms of keeping combat interesting and your choice of who you have and your main party and so on, but I also think it lends itself really well to the narrative of the story, because it really makes it feel like all of these expeditioners bring something to the expedition that nobody else does. Like, they all come with their own strengths and weaknesses. Obviously Gustave built the Luminar converter, he had his overcharge and so on. Lune's got a lot of her healing and elemental attacks, and it kind of feels like they are all contributing as a team to drive forward the expedition and try and make this successful. And they all have their place on this team. They are not just a copy and paste, or like a combat-wise, like a clone of each other that all do the same thing. It really feels like they all bring their own unique flair and unique style to the expedition, and therefore all contribute towards its success. Which I know obviously it's not to do with their combat style as to whether or not we succeed, but I kind of like that it sort of works with the narrative of that way. Like, we're all here for a reason, we all bring our own thing to the expedition, and together, combined, we make a great team. I found the combat system, it's kind of traditional enough to not be too difficult to learn. It's not like learning an entirely unique system that's really complicated, that's nothing like anything I've done before. It's kind of similar enough that once you kind of get the hang of the basics of it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's like this, and you build up that and so on. But it's fresh and unique enough to not feel like the same old, like, oh, I've done this before. This is basically just like this other game. Like, it does feel unique to this game. So I kind of like that. It was a really good balance, I think, of that. Like I said earlier, I like things being more realistic, and for that reason I tell myself I prefer games where characters fight when they're ready to fight and it's not turn-based. But in reality, I'm really slow and I take a long time to make decisions. So as much as I tell myself I prefer things to be more realistic in that sense, I think when it comes to games, I probably do actually prefer it to be turn-based. It doesn't feel as realistic, but I feel like I'm just not fast enough to do things in sort of real time, so it kind of gives me the time without feeling too rushed or stressed to think, what do I want this character to do, and what's my strategy with this fight, and so on. God, I can really feel like my voice is going now. I do really like that it hints at the best skills to use, or at least sort of suggests where you may have an advantage. So when you go to use their abilities, when it comes up in that sort of like golden or orange colour, you know, if you are feeling a bit overwhelmed or confused with the combat system or how to play a certain character, or if you're just lazy like me, you can kind of just let the game give you a nudge and a hint, and I really like that they do that. You know, it's not always perfect, and sometimes you may have a different tactic, or you maybe would gain a better advantage doing things a different way. The game still does reward you using your initiative, but I kind of like that it kind of gives people that who, like me, are maybe not so well versed in combat and game mechanics and stuff, and just often want to kind of get the fights done so they can get on with the story. I don't know builds well enough to be able to say this with certainty from my own experience, but from what I've seen in the comments, people have said that there isn't like a correct build for people or the right build for each character. It really does let you have the creative freedom to sort of build your characters how you want, and there isn't like the right way to do it. There's definitely better ways and worse ways from what you guys have taught me, and it's helped a lot with my combat. I've noticed I'm doing much better, where you've kind of given me some tips and made me aware of certain things and made suggestions. So there's definitely like ways you can do it better or worse, but there's not like a single right, this is like the best way to have this character. A lot of you have said, you know, you can kind of make them how you want, and you can lean into their different abilities and strengths, but there's still so much diversity you can have between how one person builds one character compared to how someone else will build them. So I really like that. Even though it's kind of beyond my understanding, I like that they've included that for the players, so people can get creative and do things in their own style. I like the uniqueness of enemies, and I like that it's not just a simple case of like go in and button bash and beat them. It does reward skill and patience and strategy. You know, some enemies have weak spots, or it's flying versus ground, depending on how you approached attacking them. Really, really good tip about the very subtle audio cue you can get as to when to dodge and when to parry. I've started to do that, and it's helped so much. But I kind of like that, like the more you fight a certain enemy, you start to learn their behaviour. And I've noticed as well, there were some that I had absolutely nailed down, and I went away for a bit, came back and fought them after a while, and I'd got rusty with them again. So I kind of like that it, like real life, you kind of, I don't know, get used to things you do more often, and it does reward sort of your actual skill and your actual reaction speed and stuff. So I kind of like that. It makes the fights more interesting, that they don't, it's not just like start a fight, press this button 5 times, win the fight, carry on. Like, it does kind of feel a little more engaging. And the only other thing I've really written down is that the fights so far have felt very well balanced. Nothing's felt like a massively steep learning curve. That might change as the game goes on. The amount of games where everything's felt pretty like steadily going, and then at the end is like shot up. So I don't want to speak too soon. But so far, hello. I do die sometimes, and sometimes I do think like, oh, how am I going to get out of this one? Or am I going to die this time, or will I make it? And I kind of like that it feels very perfectly balanced, which I'm sure isn't easy to do in a game, but I appreciate that they've done it so well. That's all I really have to say on combat. And by the way, if there's anything that you think I haven't covered but you would like to know, do feel free to ask me in the comments, and I'll reply and get back to you. Right, my favourite places. So, there hasn't been anywhere where I've thought, oh, this is a horrible place. Like I said earlier, the Stonewave Cliffs is my least favourite place so far, but even that I liked, and there was so much I really enjoyed about it. I just think for what it felt a bit too long. But my favourite places, I think my favourite place overall is the Ancient Sanctuary. I feel like that's not going to be most people's favourite place, but I just have a thing where I love red trees, and I think I mentioned before, like I love red Acer trees and stuff. It just felt like such a beautiful, peaceful place. All red trees. When you got to the bit by the young boy where it was like loads of cliffs and you could just see the gully down below. I wasn't a huge fan of the sky clutter with those like kite things. I didn't love a lot of the like gestural statues. I think it would be nicer if it was just natural and not all of these sort of gesturally, like, I don't know, maybe because the gesturals also feel a bit silly. But there has been no area where there's not been some kind of clutter or anything going on. But overall, I just found the Ancient Sanctuary so beautiful and in most cases so peaceful. I seem to definitely prefer places that have really beautiful, colourful nature. So some of my other places were Spring Meadows and the Flying Waters I really liked. But they both felt quite colourful, natural, bright. And by bright, I don't necessarily mean like really bright, but I mean not like in a cave, sort of like where the sunlight could reach. I seem to like places that are natural, colourful or pretty, where the sunlight can reach. Seem to be my favourite kinds of places. Obviously Esquie's nest was very pretty. I loved all the lanterns, I loved all the mushrooms, but it was inside, so it felt a bit dark, and that isn't my kind of favourite setting. And then yeah, obviously the Stone Wave Cliffs had a lot inside the caves, and also was just missing a lot of the colour. Loved the moodiness of it, loved that it was very dark and gloomy, but it also wasn't my favourite kind of place. There have not been any music tracks I've really disliked or thought like, oh god, this song again. There's been a lot of tracks that I would not listen to in my own personal time, and if it came on, like if someone put it on in my house, I'd be like, what is this? Turn it off. But it's always been very good and very fitting for the situation. So for example, a lot of the battle music is a bit too high energy or a bit too percussive for me. If I heard it on the radio, I'd be like, this is awful, turn it off. But in the fight, that is exactly the vibe you're after, so it fit really well and I really liked it. So there's been no song I've disliked as it's shown up in the game, but there's been some tracks that I've really liked. Hi, did you like some music too? I notice you always show up when I play this game. It's so funny, when I played Red Dead Redemption, I hardly ever saw Spice, I think, but Jenga used to show up all the time, my other cat. And now I'm playing Expedition 33, I rarely see Jenga, but Spice shows up all the time. Literally today, ignoring me all day, and then I log in to Expedition 33 and he appears and sits on my lap, like facing the screen. My favourite track so far, I think, is called The Whale Next to the Cliff. I have downloaded the soundtrack, so I'll put it in here. This song showed up in the Stone Wave Cliffs. I've got the complete soundtrack, but I am not listening to it. However, now that I know I've got to Act 2, I have gone through the ones that I know I will have come across so far, because I think it's done in order, and I've had my sister guiding me. I think I sent her a clip or a timestamp of one of my playthrough videos and was like, this song, and then she told me which one it was. So I'm not going through and listening to all of it, because I've heard that there are some tracks that you almost like, it's best and the most impactful if you experience them for the first time in the game in that moment. So just to reassure you, I am being careful not to go ahead and listen to loads of music that I've not come across in the game yet. But I have gone through over some of the Act 1 songs, and this song, The Whale Next to the Cliff, is one that I really liked. I don't know if it's because of the song itself or because I was watching it, listening to it while I was watching that like beautiful moody sky and the sea. But I don't know, it just felt very melancholic, kind of a little bit apprehensive, but I don't know, I just really loved the feeling of it. So this is one. Some other tracks that I liked in particular, of course the song Lumiere, which is this one, and of course everyone knows this song. It's the very first song that plays when the game starts. Genuinely, I actually really like this song. I think also the fact that it was the the song that played when you first saw that scene, when you first started the game. Everything felt new and exciting. And maybe that added a bit more weight to it, but I don't know, it's such a unique song. I kind of like the bounciness of like that dim dim da da da. So yeah, this is another song that I like. Another song, I almost excluded this from the list because I don't know, it's not a song that I kind of looked back on and thought, oh my god, yeah, that song. And it's called Cloud of Anxiety, and it plays in the Spring Meadows. And it wasn't initially what I thought of when I was thinking back on tracks that I really liked. It does have that kind of sadness to it, or like that, I don't know, it's hard to describe the feeling it gives me. But I think this is the song that I think you first hear when you come across the first group of dead expeditioners, and it's such a surprising and sad and tragic moment. Like, Gustave doesn't say much. The game doesn't kind of suddenly kick in and start talking and telling you how you should feel. It knows exactly, I think, how the player is going to feel coming across it, and it just gives them a moment with this song to just process what they're seeing, and how many expeditioners there are and how brutal it all looked. And to almost feel like you're just sort of this ghost walking among this like battlefield. And I think with this song, or this track, it just matched perfectly with the feeling you had. And it is a hauntingly beautiful track. But I think, yeah, that's why I didn't initially think about it, because I was focusing so much on the visuals of that moment. But really, the track is really good as well. This next song is Goblu, which plays in the Flying Waters. And I don't think there's anything like massively standoutish about this song, but I remember being quite excited about getting into fights because the music was so good. I don't know, I think it's just the sort of, although it's subtle, I think like the singing was really good. I just love the vibes of this song. So this is one of my favourite tracks, I think, especially in that sort of earlier part of the game. I really liked this song in the Flying Waters that shows up when you get into combat. And the last one, which I think, when I think back about the tracks that I like, this is normally the first one that comes into my head. Not necessarily because I like it the most, but because I think it's just the most unique so far. And that is, it's called Gestural Summer Party, and it plays in the Ancient Sanctuary. And I think it's because it was so unexpected. Everything so far has been a bit more, I don't know, like what you'd expect, I guess, in a game. I wasn't expecting this really cool, summery EDM kind of music, but what a bop. Like, this is such a good song. The sanctuary is all like beautiful, and it almost feels a little bit, almost like Japanese or something. Like, it looks so beautiful. And, you know, yeah, the gesturals are a bit silly and high energy and stuff, but like, I was not expecting something like this. But I loved it. I couldn't stop like jigging to it when I was sort of playing in the combat. So yeah, this is definitely like what I think back on. I think because it was the one that surprised me the most in a good way when I heard it. So the last bit of reflection I've got is my current theories and predictions. I think I covered a lot of this at the start of this video, so I don't know how much is actually left to cover. I think I mentioned that I think Maelle was a part of Expedition Zero somehow, or at least was part of the continent when Expedition Zero came here, but somehow lost her memory and ended up back at Lumiere, but I'm not entirely sure how. I found it interesting that Expedition Zero allegedly did make it back. They were apparently the only expedition that made it back. When Lune was triangulating where they would reach the continent, she said that Expedition Zero was the only one to make it back. They made it all the way to the monolith, and then they came back and sort of passed on the information. That means at least one person from Expedition Zero made it back. However, based on what it seems like we know, they didn't mention at all that what happened at the monolith, at least not that I've been told. It doesn't sound like they mentioned at all that some people no longer age. But they might not have known that because you need some time to realise you're not aging, I suppose. So either they didn't know or they knew and didn't mention it. But it also doesn't sound like they mentioned that people survived and were still on the continent. Either they didn't know and everybody on Expedition Zero was presumed dead who stayed on the continent, or again they chose not to disclose that something had happened and some of the expeditioners were still there but maybe no longer going after the paintress. So it's curious, like, did they break away early enough to not really have the awareness themselves, and they were as clueless as the rest of us, or did they come back, give us some information but not all of it? And I'm guessing they weren't someone ageless because we would have known by now. So they likely either died from their injuries or gamage or something. It's an interesting one. I have nothing to base this on. Like, nothing in the story so far that I have noticed has suggested this will be the case. But a question I've been asking since the beginning is what happens when the monolith number reaches 0? Or sort of goes from 1 to whatever comes next. Of course, all of the world is fractured, and also at least the physics of it seem to be frozen in time. We can move around and do things, like leaves still fall from trees, but you can see all the shards in the sky, the buildings suspended, the rubble hanging in the air. Whatever that impact was or explosion was at the time of the fracture is paused physically in the sky. And you've obviously got all this like crazy blue rock and everything showing up, the blue and gold stuff, which I'm still suspicious of, based on absolutely nothing other than a thought. I wonder if when the monolith reaches 0, at that point in time, everything carries on again. Time restarts for the explosion, impact, whatever it is. And whatever needs to be done to stop that, to undo time or stop that becoming catastrophic, or maybe it's inevitable, whatever it is that needs to be done in the meantime needs to be done by then. So it is a countdown, but maybe it's more like we managed to buy 100 years as opposed to, I don't think we're going to go into the minuses. That I'm pretty confident about, but I don't know what happens when we hit 0, but I wonder if the fracture continues and the world ends or something, and we need to stop it before that happens. And also, if time did stop, or if like obviously the monolith popped up, I assume it wasn't always there, if time was paused for 100 years in terms of the explosion and the fracture, who or what paused it? And like, why 100 years? Why not 50? Why not 500? And why? I don't know. But I feel like there would have been someone or something behind that made those decisions. And also, if so, why does nobody remember? Because, of course, nobody alive in Lumiere today was around at the time of the fracture. But, like, people can write it down, and we did have the person who came back from Expedition Zero, and I'm sure it would have been passed down verbally. So it's strange how, at least as far as we the player know, so little is known about what actually happened back then. If all humans were wiped out, then we wouldn't exist, so people were alive and survived since then. And you'd think someone would write a journal, right? Or it would be documented of like, this happened in this year. This is how the paintress appeared. There was that kind of mention, I've forgotten his name, but the religious guy we spoke to in Lumiere, who was like, the paintress is displeased and has been gamaging us or something like that. But that's like the best I think we've had on like what actually happened back then. And I'm surprised not many people have been like, oh, remember that time when aliens invaded, or remember that time when that nuclear bomb went off, or like, you know, said what happened other than just the fracture, which is for somebody who's not from this world is a bit hard to understand. I think that those of us from Expedition 33, I think over time will actually get quite attached to Verso. I think he'll become to feel like one of us. you know, we all have the kind of same goal. We're going to work together, and I think over time, through whatever it is we end up going through, I think we'll become quite close. I don't know if Lune and Sciel will survive. I hope and think Maelle will, but I wonder if, yeah, over time, we get really attached to Verso. But if we don't succeed, then I guess everyone dies, which is going to be very sad. If we do succeed, and the clock begins again, will Verso, will he be the age he visually is now, and then continue to age year by year until he reaches his physical old age and eventually dies? Or will time suddenly jump ahead to where he would have been if he did age, and he'll sort of insta-die? Well, I mean, he'll be like, what, 100 and something? I don't know. I wonder if it's going to be, we kind of succeed, but after becoming really attached to Verso, he also ends up dying, and it's kind of like puts a really bittersweet note on the end of the game. I don't know. I don't even know what's going to happen the next day, so for me to try and predict the end of the game right now seems a bit silly, but yeah, I wonder if they'll either all die for the cause, but manage to defeat the Paintress, or manage to resolve whatever is going on for those who come after, for the rest of Lumiere, and for all the children who can be born and then grow up and grow old. And maybe we'll all give our lives for the cause, but make it. Or maybe, I don't think we'll all just completely die. I feel like that would be a bit of a anticlimactic ending to the game. I feel like at least something will come of it if we do. Or maybe one or some of us survive, but I think we'll have to lose Verso at the end, if we do defeat the Paintress and if he does start aging again. Maybe not. Maybe he will just carry on from where he left off, but I wonder if maybe it will just all catch up to him in one go. Okay, and so concludes my reflection on Act 1, the story so far, the characters so far, my favourite bits, my least favourite bits. I think I've covered quite a lot. If I have missed anything, or there's any questions you have, of course, please refrain from spoilers, or anything that's even going to be a half spoiler. But if you want to pick my brains or know anything that I've not covered, please put it in the comments, and as long as it's a spoiler-free comment section, I will go in and answer any questions you have. If you want to know anything on my mind, or how I felt about anything in particular that I've not touched on, then of course I'm all yours. Go ahead and ask a question, I'll answer. And I'm really curious to know what you guys think as well. I want to know what your favourite songs are, your favourite places. Again, no spoilers please, but based on where I'm at so far, what did you think of the characters, or theories, or sort of what did you like or not like? I know a lot of people have already played this game, but it would be nice to almost know, like, sort of frozen in time from this point, where was everybody at, and where were we the same, and where were we different? Do you have any different takes on some of the things I've said? Because obviously all of this is just from my perspective, but other people might approach things from a different angle, or pick up on things I missed. So please do put it in the comments. I'd be very curious to know your side of things. And then I was just going to go on sort of what my plan is for the next episode and sort of next steps. Again, I've got no idea what happens in this game, so I may plan and it may not happen how I think. I will probably learn how Verso fights. I'm very curious to know what his sort of combat style is. Now I know everyone has their own different ability. Sorry, that was Spice leaving my lap. So I'm very curious to know sort of what his style is, what his abilities are. I don't think there's anything that kind of gives him away. Doesn't look, he's not got a sword or anything. We did see, did he put up a sword to stop Renoir? He's got what looks like a kind of sheath or quiver there. But I don't know. I wonder what like his weapon is, or what his moves are. So that would be very interesting. I wonder if we've lost the Pictos that we had equipped to Gustave. But I think he learnt all the ones that he had, so I think it's okay because I can all use them. So we'll learn how Verso fights and see his abilities. I do definitely plan on going back to the Stone Wave Cliffs. I know that I rushed through some of that. I didn't check thoroughly, and I'm pretty sure there's quite a few bits I've missed. And I think in the comments some people have hinted that I've missed some things too. So I do plan to go back a little more awake and a little earlier in the day, and properly explore that area as best I can, and hopefully find some things that I missed. I do want to try and see if I can find Gustave's body, or where he died, and see if there's any clues there or a cutscene or something. Again, I'm not holding out hope. I don't think there will be, but you never know. I hadn't written this down, but I would like to go to the manor with Verso. And again, I don't expect anything is going to happen, but I would like to see, because we saw him in the manor in Maelle's nightmare, so I'm just curious to test and see if anything happens. There are a bunch of areas I've not even been to at all yet, so for example the Yellow Tree Forest. There's a load of other areas that Esquie can now clear and we can go and have an explore, so I'd like to see what's there. I'm hoping we find some other expeditioners, but I don't know if that's how you do it because we've not found any others yet. I want to see if I can get back to the beach where the attack first happened, or if that's not somewhere I can access. Yeah, just explore, see those other areas. You know, I've summarised my favourite areas so far, but I've not actually been to all the areas that are available in Act 1, so that would be quite good to do. And then on to the next part of the map and story. Now I guess we can sail on the sea on Esquie. So that's kind of what I'm planning on doing next. I'm hoping, I know obviously we did jump down onto Esquie, but I'm hoping when I leave camp I'm still in the first area, or at least can get back to it. If it all goes that smoothly and I have that much say in what happens next, and it's not more unexpected twists and turns. But I'm very curious to see more of Verso, and what he's like with the rest of the party, and hopefully he can offer us some answers. Hopefully he remembers and is willing to share. But we'll see. So, thank you so much for watching. We didn't end up triggering any cutscenes or anything, which is good. Again, pop in the comments. I'd love to hear your views and your thoughts at this point in the story. Please let me know if there's anything you'd like to know that I've not covered. And I guess I will see you in the next episode for the next leg of the story. Thank you for being with me so far. Take care of yourselves until then, and I will see you in the next one. Bye everyone!
Dim, dam, dadilam, vacarme, s'en va dans l'oubli éternel. Et Gustave, dom guardiam, dilim, dididididam, lutes sera dodidam, seram. Dim, dim, da da da, dim, dim, da da da, dim, da di dam. Dim dim da 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 dim dim da 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 dim